On Christmas night, a single father sat alone in a restaurant, watching his blind date walk away without a backward glance. The third rejection this year. Just as Daniel Moore reached for his coat, ready to return to his daughter and accept that this was his life now, a voice cut through his humiliation like a blade through silk. "Excuse me," the woman at the next table said, her eyes holding a strange mixture of desperation and calculation. "I know this sounds insane, but I have a proposition for you. Would you consider being my husband?" Daniel froze, certain he'd misheard, but her unwavering gaze told him she was deadly serious. Before we begin, if you're enjoying this story, please hit the like button and comment with your city below. I'd love to see how far this tale travels across the world. Now, let's dive into a Christmas night that would change everything. The bistro's twinkling lights felt like tiny accusations, each one highlighting Daniel Moore's complete and utter failure as he watched Jessica Chen gather her designer purse and stand from their table. She didn't even bother with a polite excuse, no fabricated emergency or sudden illness. Just a cool assessment of his worth that took exactly 14 minutes from appetizers to abandonment. "I'm sorry, but this isn't going to work," Jessica said, her voice carrying the same tone she might use to decline an upsell at a car dealership. "I was clear on the dating app about what I'm looking for, and—" She gestured vaguely at him, a movement that somehow encompassed his entire existence. "This isn't it." Daniel's throat tightened, but he managed a nod. 7 years of widowhood had taught him to swallow humiliation with grace. "I understand. Thank you for being honest." "The thing is," Jessica continued, apparently not finished dissecting his inadequacies, "I'm 34. I want a family, but I want to start fresh, you know? I don't want to be a stepmother to someone else's kid. That's just a lot of baggage." The word hung in the air between them like a slap. Baggage. His daughter, his beautiful, brilliant Mia, reduced to inconvenient luggage. "Have a nice holiday," Jessica added, already turning away. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor with the efficient rhythm of a woman who had better places to be, better prospects to pursue. The restaurant door swung shut behind her, letting in a blast of December cold that seemed to settle directly in Daniel's chest. He sat motionless, staring at the untouched wine glasses and the breadbasket Jessica hadn't bothered with. Around him, the restaurant hummed with Christmas cheer, couples leaning close over candlelight, families laughing at crowded tables, a group of friends toasting the season. Everyone belonged to someone, everyone except him. The waiter approached with practiced sympathy. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" "Just the check, please." Daniel's voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. "The lady already settled her portion on her way out," the waiter said quietly, a flicker of pity crossing his professional mask. Of course she had. Efficient to the end. Daniel pulled out his wallet, calculating quickly. The evening's humiliation would cost him $43 he couldn't really afford, money that should have gone toward Mia's new winter boots or the dental appointment he'd been postponing. He left cash on the table and reached for his coat, the worn wool a stark contrast to the cashmere and designer labels surrounding him. This was his life now. This was all it would ever be. "Excuse me." The voice came from his left, soft but clear enough to cut through his spiral of self-pity. Daniel turned to find a woman sitting alone at the adjacent table, watching him with an intensity that made him instinctively check if he'd somehow offended her. She was striking in that way that made you look twice, not because of conventional beauty, though she was certainly attractive, but because of something in her bearing. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back in an elegant twist, wearing a navy dress that probably cost more than Daniel made in a month. But it was her eyes that held him, dark, intelligent, and carrying a weight he recognized instantly because he saw it in his own mirror every morning: loneliness, the bone-deep kind that no amount of success or money could fill. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said, setting down her wine glass with deliberate care, "but I couldn't help overhearing some of your conversation just now." Heat crept up Daniel's neck. Perfect. A witness to his rejection. "It's fine. These things happen." "They do," she agreed, her tone neutral. "More often than anyone likes to admit." She paused, seeming to war with herself about something. "This is going to sound absolutely insane, and you're well within your rights to think I'm crazy, but—" She took a breath. "Would you consider being my husband?" Daniel blinked. The restaurant noise faded to white static. He must have misheard. I'm sorry, what? I'm proposing a marriage, the woman said, her voice steady despite the absurdity of her words. Not now, obviously, but as a genuine possibility, a partnership. She gestured to the empty chair at her table. Please, sit. Let me explain before you run for the exit. Daniel should have politely declined, should have made some excuse and left this bizarre encounter behind, but something in her expression, that same desperate hope he'd been trying to suppress all evening, kept him rooted in place. I'm not... He shook his head. Is this some kind of joke? Did someone put you up to this? I assure you, no one finds my situation amusing enough to orchestrate pranks. She tilted her head slightly. You're Daniel Moore, correct? You work in IT at Sterling Solutions, you have a 7-year-old daughter, and you've been a widower for, I'm guessing, about 7 years based on your profile age. The blood drained from Daniel's face. How do you... The same dating app your recent companion found you on, she said calmly. Though I never messaged you because, frankly, I assumed you'd find my circumstances as unsuitable as I suspect most people find yours. She extended her hand across the gap between tables. I'm Evelyn Cross, and I'd very much like 5 minutes of your time to present what might be the solution to both our problems. Daniel glanced at the exit, then at Evelyn's outstretched hand. Everything about this screamed danger, stranger danger, scam alert, too good to be true warning bells. But underneath the alarm was curiosity, and beneath that, something he barely dared acknowledge, the faint pulse of possibility. He moved to her table and took her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. 5 minutes, he said. That's all I need. Evelyn waited until he'd settled into the chair before continuing. I'm going to be brutally honest because I suspect we're both too tired for anything else. I'm 36 years old. I have a successful career in corporate law. I own my condo, I have excellent health insurance, and I've built a comfortable life by any objective measure. She paused. I also cannot have biological children due to medical complications from an accident when I was younger, and that single fact has made me fundamentally undesirable in the dating market. Daniel's response came before he could stop it. That's incredibly unfair. Life often is, Evelyn said with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. But it's taught me to be pragmatic. I've spent 3 years trying to find a partner through traditional means, apps, setups, social events. Without fail, the moment I disclose my inability to have children, men disappear. Some are kind about it, most aren't. But the result is always the same. I'm sorry, Daniel said quietly. People should be better than that. And yet, Evelyn lifted her wine glass, examining the burgundy liquid as if it held answers. Meanwhile, you face the opposite problem. You already have a child, which makes you baggage to women who want to start fresh. You're automatically excluded from an entire category of potential partners simply because you're a father. The accuracy of her assessment stung. You really did read my profile. And the comments section of every photo, Evelyn admitted. You're clearly devoted to your daughter. You work hard. You're honest about your limitations, and you get rejected anyway because you come as a package deal. She set down her glass. So here's my proposition. What if we solved each other's problems? Daniel leaned back in his chair, trying to process this surreal turn of events. You want to marry someone you've never met because we both get rejected a lot? That's insane, Evelyn finished. I said as much, but consider the logistics. I want a family, but can't have biological children. You have a daughter who needs a mother figure and a partner who won't see her as an obstacle. I can provide financial stability and a home. You can provide the family structure I'll never have otherwise. She met his gaze directly. We're both tired, Daniel. Tired of being alone, tired of being rejected, tired of pretending we don't want what everyone else seems to find so easily. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Marriage isn't a business transaction. Isn't it? Evelyn's expression softened slightly. My parents had an arranged marriage, 42 years together, and they're genuinely happy. They built love from partnership, not the other way around. I'm not suggesting we fake affection or pretend at passion. I'm suggesting we start with honesty and mutual benefit and see what grows from there. You don't even know me. I know you raise your daughter alone while working full-time. I know you budget carefully. Those are last season's shoes, and your coat has been professionally repaired at the right elbow. I know you tried online dating despite probably hating every minute of it, because you're still trying to believe someone might want you." Evelyn's voice dropped. "And I know what it's like to sit across from someone who looks at you like you're fundamentally defective because your life doesn't fit their perfect fantasy." Daniel's hands tightened on the table edge. The observation was too accurate, too raw. "I'm not saying decide tonight," Evelyn continued. "I'm saying consider the possibility. Meet me for coffee. Let me explain my situation more fully. If you think I'm crazy, walk away and forget this conversation. But if any part of you is tired of being alone, tired of being rejected, tired of watching your daughter pay the price for other people's limitations." She pulled a business card from her purse and slid it across the table. "Call me." Daniel stared at the card. Evelyn Cross, Senior Associate, Morrison and Hayes, LLP. An address in the financial district that suggested corner offices and six-figure salaries. This woman could have anyone. Why would she proposition a struggling IT technician in a mid-tier restaurant on Christmas night? "Why me?" he asked. "Specifically, there have to be other single fathers on that app." "There are," Evelyn agreed. "But your profile was different. You didn't hide your daughter or minimize her presence in your life. Every photo included her. Every interest you listed considered her needs first. And in your bio, you wrote something that stuck with me." She recited from memory. "Looking for someone who understands that love isn't about finding perfection. It's about choosing someone and building something real, even when it's hard." Daniel felt his throat constrict. He'd written that at 2 a.m. after another failed date, convinced no one would ever respond to something so earnest. "That's not what most people want to hear," Evelyn said quietly. "Most people are looking for easy, for chemistry, for some magical spark that makes everything effortless. But I don't believe in that anymore. I believe in compatibility and commitment and choosing to build something worth having." She stood, leaving several bills on her table. "Think about it. Or don't. But you have my card if you decide you're tired of being alone." She moved toward the exit with the same grace she'd exhibited throughout their conversation. Composed, controlled, certain of her worth even in the face of rejection. At the door, she paused and looked back. "For what it's worth," Evelyn said, "the woman who walked out tonight is an idiot. Any child who has you as a father is extraordinarily lucky." Then she was gone, disappearing into the December night and leaving Daniel alone with a business card and the most bizarre proposition he'd ever received. He sat there for a long moment, turning the card over in his fingers. His phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Chen, his elderly neighbor who watched Mia on date nights. "Mia's asleep. Don't rush home. Hope it went well." Daniel's laugh came out bitter and broken. Well, that was one word for it. He pocketed Evelyn's card and headed for the exit, pushing into the cold December air. The street was emptying as restaurants closed and families hurried home to their warm houses and waiting children. Tomorrow was Christmas. Mia would wake up excited despite their modest circumstances, thrilled with whatever small gifts Daniel had managed to scrape together. She never complained, never asked why they couldn't afford more, never questioned why it was just the two of them. But she noticed. Of course she noticed. Noticed when other kids talked about their mothers. Noticed when school events asked for both parents. Noticed when her father came home from failed dates with that particular expression of quiet defeat. Daniel stopped at the corner, watching his breath fog in the freezing air. An impossible proposition from a stranger. A marriage of convenience to solve mutual problems. It was absurd, reckless, potentially dangerous. It was also the first honest conversation he'd had with another adult in years. His apartment was a 30-minute bus ride away, a cramped two-bedroom in a building that had seen better decades. Mrs. Chen met him at the door with her usual warm smile, carefully not asking how the date had gone. She was kind that way. "Mia made you a Christmas card," she whispered, gesturing to the kitchen table. "Worked on it for an hour after dinner." Daniel found it next to the refrigerator, construction paper folded in half, decorated with slightly crooked stars and a crayon drawing of two stick figures holding hands. "Merry Christmas, Daddy. I love you most in the whole world." Something cracked in his chest. He paid Mrs. Chen, locked the door behind her, and moved quietly to Mia's room. His daughter was sprawled across her bed, dark hair tangled on the pillow, one arm wrapped around the stuffed rabbit that had belonged to her mother. 7 years old and already so much like Sarah, same stubborn chin, same generous spirit, same unconscious grace. Sarah would have known what to do about Evelyn's proposition, would have laughed at the absurdity while seriously considering the possibilities. She'd always been braver than Daniel, more willing to take risks for potential rewards. But Sarah was gone, and he was here alone, trying to be enough for a child who deserved so much more than a father who couldn't even successfully navigate a dinner date. Daniel retreated to the kitchen and pulled out Evelyn's business card. In the harsh fluorescent light, it looked even more intimidating. Embossed lettering, premium cardstock, the kind of professional polish that came from a world Daniel barely understood. He should throw it away, should forget this entire evening and return to his careful, constrained life. The safe choice, the reasonable choice. Instead, he opened his laptop and typed Evelyn Cross Morrison Hayes into the search bar. Her professional photo appeared immediately. Same intelligent eyes, same composed expression. A profile on the firm's website outlined an impressive career trajectory. Cornell Law, federal clerkship, rapid advancement to senior associate. Published articles on corporate litigation strategy. Pro bono work with family advocacy organizations. A woman who had built success through sheer competence and determination. Daniel dug deeper, finding mentions in legal journals, quotes in news articles about high-profile cases. Nothing about her personal life, no social media presence, no public relationships, no candid photos at events. Just the carefully curated image of a woman who kept her private life intensely private, which made her public proposition tonight even more striking. Whatever had driven Evelyn to approach a stranger in a restaurant, it wasn't impulsiveness. This was a woman who calculated risks, who planned meticulously, who was possibly just as desperate and lonely as he was. Daniel closed his laptop and moved to the window, looking out over the city's scattered lights. Somewhere out there, Evelyn was probably second-guessing her decision to approach him, probably mortified that she'd exposed herself so completely to a stranger, probably convinced he'd dismiss her as crazy and move on with his life. The sensible thing would be to prove her right. But Daniel had been sensible for 7 years. Sensible had gotten him rejected 3 times this year alone. Sensible meant another decade of failed dates and growing isolation while Mia watched her father shrink from life's possibilities. His phone sat on the counter, screen dark and accusing. One call could change everything, or ruin everything. The uncertainty was terrifying. Behind him, Mia stirred in her sleep, murmuring something inaudible before settling back into dreams where mothers existed and loneliness was just a word, not a constant companion. Daniel picked up his phone. The coffee shop Evelyn suggested was aggressively upscale. Exposed brick, artisanal pastries displayed like gallery pieces, beans sourced from cooperatives with unpronounceable names. Daniel felt acutely out of place in his department store slacks and bargain rack shirt, but he'd learned long ago that pretending confidence could sometimes manufacture the real thing. Evelyn was already seated at a corner table, dressed in weekend casual that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly grocery budget. She looked up as he approached, and something that might have been relief flickered across her face. "You came," she said. "I almost didn't." Daniel sat across from her, accepting the coffee she'd already ordered. Black, 1 sugar, exactly how he'd listed it on his dating profile. "I spent 3 days convincing myself this was insane. And yet here you are." Evelyn's slight smile suggested she'd had similar doubts. "Thank you for taking the risk." "I haven't agreed to anything," Daniel said quickly. "I'm here to listen, that's all." "That's more than I had any right to expect." Evelyn wrapped her hands around her own cup, some complicated Italian preparation that had required 3 sentences to order. "I owe you a fuller explanation of my situation, and an apology for ambushing you on Christmas night." "You were desperate," Daniel said. "It wasn't quite a question." "I was having the worst holiday of my life," Evelyn admitted. "I'd spent Christmas dinner with my parents, listening to my mother make increasingly unsubtle comments about my empty house and wasted potential. My father suggested I consider adoption as a consolation prize since I couldn't have real children. And my younger sister, married, 3 kids, perfect suburban life, Spent the entire meal treating me like I was somehow defective for not settling down with whatever man would have me. Fertility issues be damned. She took a deliberate breath, reestablishing her composure. So I went to that restaurant alone, ordered an expensive bottle of wine, and tried very hard not to cry in public. And then I watched your date walk away, heard her call your daughter baggage, and something in me just snapped. I thought, here's someone who understands, someone who gets rejected for circumstances beyond his control, someone who might possibly be crazy enough to consider an alternative approach. Daniel absorbed this, recognizing himself in her description. You could have just sent me a message on the app. Would you have responded to a stranger proposing marriage via text? Fair point. He studied her carefully. Tell me about the medical situation, if we're being brutally honest. Evelyn didn't flinch. Car accident when I was 27. Drunk driver ran a red light. I survived with relatively minor injuries except for internal damage that required emergency surgery. They saved my life but compromised my reproductive system. The doctors were very clear. Biological children aren't possible. I'm sorry. So am I. Evelyn's voice carried the weight of old grief. I spent 2 years in therapy processing it. Acceptance doesn't make it easier, but it does make it manageable. I know who I am and what I can offer. I just need someone willing to look past what I can't provide. And you think that's me? I think you understand limitations, Evelyn said carefully. You've spent 7 years being rejected because you have a daughter. I've spent 9 years being rejected because I can't have children. We're both tired of being punished for circumstances we didn't choose. She leaned forward slightly. I'm not looking for romance, Daniel. I'm looking for partnership, compatibility, a genuine family built on honesty and mutual benefit. What about love? The question escaped before Daniel could stop it. What about it? Evelyn's expression softened. My parents' marriage was arranged. They learned to love each other through shared experience and commitment. It's not the story people want to hear, but it's real, and it's lasted. She paused. I'm not saying we'll fall in love. I'm saying we might build something better than love. Genuine partnership based on respect and compatible goals. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to defend the concept of romantic love and passionate connection. But 7 years of widowhood had taught him that love, however real, could disappear in an instant. Sarah had loved him desperately, and then she died giving birth to Mia, and all that love couldn't change reality or pay bills or raise a daughter alone. Tell me about Mia, Evelyn said, shifting the conversation. What she's like, what she needs, what you're looking for in a potential partner regarding her. The question surprised him with its directness. She's 7. Brilliant, stubborn, terrifyingly perceptive. She does well in school, loves science, wants to be an astronaut one day. She's also... Daniel hesitated. She's starting to ask questions about why she doesn't have a mother, why other kids do and she doesn't. I've tried to explain about Sarah dying, about it not being anyone's fault, but she's at the age where she's noticing differences. Does she know you're dating? She knows I've tried. She knows it hasn't worked. Daniel's hands tightened on his coffee cup. After tonight's disaster, she asked me if women don't like her, if that's why they leave. Evelyn's expression shifted to something harder. That's unconscionable. She's a child. She's also not stupid. She hears things, picks up on subtext. The last woman I dated actually told me Mia was too attached to me and needed to learn independence. Daniel's laugh was bitter. She was 6 at the time. Some people shouldn't be allowed near children, Evelyn said flatly. She was quiet for a moment, then, I'd like to meet her. Not as a potential stepmother, that's far too premature, but as someone who might be in her life. I want to see if we're compatible before we take this any further. The suggestion should have triggered every parental protection instinct Daniel had. Instead, he found himself considering it. Why? Because children are honest in ways adults aren't, Evelyn said. If Mia and I don't connect, this entire proposition is moot. I'm not interested in forcing a relationship or making a child accommodate an adult arrangement. This only works if it's good for all 3 of us. Daniel studied her across the table, trying to see past the polish to the person beneath. You're serious about this. Actually serious. Completely. Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. I've spent 9 years being rejected. I'm done waiting for someone to choose me despite my limitations. I'm ready to build something different, something based on honesty and compatibility rather than fairy tale expectations. She paused. But only if it's right for your daughter too. That's non-negotiable. The protectiveness in her tone decided him. Saturday, the park near my apartment, 2 o'clock. Mia will be there with me. You can meet her, spend some time together. No pressure, no expectations, just see what happens. Saturday, Evelyn agreed. She pulled out her phone. Give me your number, I'll text you the details. They exchanged information with the same business-like efficiency they might use for a professional meeting. As Daniel stood to leave, Evelyn caught his wrist gently. Daniel. She waited until he met her eyes. I know this is unconventional. I know it seems crazy. But I promise you, if we do this, I will never make your daughter feel like she's anything other than wanted. Whatever else happens between us, that's my commitment. The intensity in her voice, the absolute certainty, loosened something in Daniel's chest he hadn't realized was clenched. Saturday, he repeated, and left before he could change his mind. Mia was sitting at the kitchen table when Daniel returned home, carefully coloring a picture of what appeared to be a rocket ship. She looked up as he entered, dark eyes assessing him with that unsettling perceptiveness she'd inherited from her mother. How was coffee? She asked, returning to her coloring. How did you... Daniel stopped. Of course she knew. Mia knew everything, absorbed information like a satellite receiving signals. It was fine, good conversation. With a lady? Yes, with a lady. Mia selected a purple crayon with great deliberation. Is she nice? I think so, Daniel said carefully, sitting across from her. I don't know her very well yet, but she seems kind. Does she like kids? The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through Daniel's carefully maintained composure. I think so. Actually, he took a breath. She'd like to meet you, if that's okay with you. Mia's hand stilled on her drawing. Really? Really? We could go to the park on Saturday. She'd come by, we'd all spend some time together. Very casual, no big deal. Daniel tried to keep his voice light despite his hammering heart. But only if you want to. What's her name? Evelyn? Mia tested the syllables silently, then nodded. Okay, I'll meet Evelyn. She returned to her coloring as if they'd discussed nothing more significant than the weather. But Daniel caught the small smile tugging at her mouth, the careful precision with which she selected her next color. Hope was a dangerous thing. For both of them. Saturday arrived with cloudless winter sunshine that turned the park's playground equipment into gleaming sculptures of primary colors. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early with Mia, who immediately claimed the swings and demanded he push her astronaut high. Evelyn appeared exactly on time, wearing jeans and a sweater that somehow managed to look both casual and expensive. She paused at the playground's edge, and Daniel saw her take a steadying breath before approaching. You must be Mia, Evelyn said, her voice warm but not patronizing. I'm Evelyn. Your dad said you're interested in space. Mia slowed her swing, studying Evelyn with that same unnervingly direct gaze. He said you're nice. I try to be, Evelyn smiled. Though I think whether I'm nice is something you should decide for yourself. That's a good answer, Mia announced, apparently satisfied. Do you know about rockets? Some, Evelyn admitted. I had a friend in law school who worked on satellite law, the regulations about what can and can't go into space. She taught me a fair amount about orbital mechanics. Mia's eyes widened. Really? That's so cool! Did you know that? And just like that, she was off, rattling through a stream of space facts with the enthusiasm only a 7-year-old could muster. Evelyn listened attentively, asking follow-up questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than polite indulgence. Daniel hung back, watching the interaction with a mixture of hope and terror. This could work, or it could be the worst mistake he'd ever made. After an hour of playground equipment and space facts, they moved to a nearby cafe. Mia ordered hot chocolate with extra marshmallows and continued her interrogation of Evelyn, who fielded questions about her job, her apartment, her favorite foods, and her opinion on various scientific theories with impressive patience. Do you have kids? Mia asked suddenly, cutting through a discussion about black holes. Evelyn's expression didn't change, but Daniel saw her fingers tighten slightly on her coffee cup. No, I don't. I can't have biological children because of a medical situation, but I'd very much like to have a family someday. Mia absorbed this with serious consideration. That's sad. But my friend Emma's adopted, and she says that's the same as having real parents. Emma's right, Evelyn said softly. Family isn't just about biology. It's about who chooses to love you and take care of you. Like my dad, Mia said, reaching for Daniel's hand across the table. He chose to keep me even though my mom died. That makes him extra family. Daniel's throat closed completely. Evelyn's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. That makes him the very best kind of family, Evelyn agreed. They spent another hour together before Mia started showing signs of tiredness. As they prepared to leave, Mia tugged on Evelyn's sleeve. Can we do this again? She asked. Next week, maybe? Evelyn glanced at Daniel, who managed a nod. I'd like that very much, she told Mia. If your dad says it's okay. It's okay, Mia said firmly, deciding for both of them. She looked between the adults with that knowing expression that suggested she understood far more than she should. I like you, Evelyn. You don't pretend to like me. You actually do. I actually do, Evelyn confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. On the walk home, Mia was uncharacteristically quiet. Finally, she looked up at Daniel with serious eyes. Is Evelyn going to be my new mom? Daniel's steps faltered. Would you want that, if it happened? Mia considered this with her usual thoughtful deliberation. I think maybe yes. She's smart and she listens, and she didn't lie about not having kids, and she looked at you the way you look at pictures of mom, like you're sad but also hoping something good might happen. She swung their joined hands. I think mom would like her too, because mom would want us to be happy, right? Daniel had to stop walking entirely, crouching down to Mia's level. Your mom would want that more than anything, he managed, pulling his daughter close. And for what it's worth, I think you're right. I think mom would like Evelyn very much. Then we should see what happens, Mia declared with 7-year-old certainty. That's what you always say. We can't know until we try. Out of the mouths of children, Daniel thought, came either wisdom or disaster, sometimes both. That night, after Mia was asleep, Daniel texted Evelyn. She liked you. More importantly, you liked her. Actually liked her. Not just the idea of her. That matters. Evelyn's response came quickly. She's remarkable. You've done an extraordinary job raising her. And yes, I genuinely liked her. This could work, Daniel. If we're brave enough to try. Daniel stared at his phone for a long moment, feeling the weight of possibility pressing against the comfort of familiar limitation. Brave enough to try. He'd been brave once when he'd asked Sarah to marry him despite knowing her pregnancy carried risks. He'd been brave when he'd held his daughter for the first time while his wife died in the next room. He'd been brave through 7 years of single parenthood and soul-crushing loneliness. Maybe he had one more act of bravery left in him. Coffee again next week? He typed. Same place. We should talk about what this actually means. Logistics, expectations, timeline. Wednesday, 2 o'clock. I'll bring my calendar and my list of questions. You have a list? I'm a lawyer. I always have a list. Despite everything, Daniel smiled. Whatever happened next, at least it wouldn't be boring. The coffee meetings became a weekly ritual, each one peeling back another layer of careful pretense until what remained was startlingly honest. Evelyn brought her list, typed, organized, color-coded by priority, and Daniel countered with questions he'd scribbled on napkins during his lunch breaks. They mapped out possibilities like architects designing a building that didn't yet exist, trying to imagine the weight-bearing walls and structural integrity of a marriage built on pragmatism rather than passion. What about your parents? Daniel asked during their third meeting, watching Evelyn's expression shift into something harder. There'll be a problem, she admitted, stirring sugar into her coffee with unnecessary precision. My father is a corporate executive who believes everything worth having requires strategic planning. My mother is a socialite who thinks marriage should elevate status, not solve problems. They'll see you as... She paused, clearly choosing her words carefully. Beneath you, Daniel finished flatly. You can say it. I know what I am. You're a man raising a remarkable child while holding down a demanding job and trying to build something better than loneliness, Evelyn said with quiet force. That's worth more than my father's corner office or my mother's country club membership. But they won't see it that way, at least not initially. Will that be a deal breaker? Daniel needed to know. If they reject me, will you back down? Evelyn's jaw tightened. I'm 36 years old. I've built my career. I own my home. I make my own decisions. My parents' approval would be nice, but it's not required. She met his gaze directly. However, I won't lie to you. Their disapproval will make things difficult. They have influence, connections, ways of making their displeasure known. You need to understand what you'd be walking into. Rich people problems, Daniel muttered, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, that was accurate, Evelyn interrupted with a wry smile. Though painful nonetheless. Yes, these are privileged concerns, but they're still real obstacles we'd need to navigate together. Daniel appreciated her honesty even as it scared him. What about the practical stuff? If we actually did this, how would it work? You live in the financial district. I live in a rent-controlled apartment in Queens. Mia's school is 15 minutes from our place. Her entire world is in that neighborhood. Then we stay there, Evelyn said simply. Or we find something nearby that works for all three of us. I don't need luxury, Daniel. I need family. Everything else is negotiable. You'd leave your condo just like that? I'd sell or rent it out. It's square footage and a good investment, but it's not home. Home is... Evelyn's expression softened slightly. Home is where the people you love are. At least that's what I'm hoping it could become. They worked through logistics with the same methodical care lawyers and IT specialists brought to complex problems. Timeline: 6 months of dating publicly, building toward an engagement that wouldn't shock their respective circles. Living arrangements. Evelyn would gradually spend more time at Daniel's apartment, letting Mia adjust to her presence before any major changes. Finances. They'd maintain separate accounts initially, but contribute proportionally to shared expenses. Legal protections. Evelyn insisted on a prenuptial agreement that would protect both Mia's interests and Daniel's parental rights. I want to adopt her, Evelyn said during their 5th coffee meeting, the words tumbling out quickly as if she'd been holding them back. Not immediately, not until she's ready and you're comfortable and we're all certain this is working, but eventually I'd like to legally become her mother, if that's something you'd consider. Daniel's coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. You've thought about this. Really thought about it. I've thought about little else, Evelyn admitted. Mia deserves security, legal protection, someone who has the right to make decisions if something ever happened to you. And her voice caught slightly. I want that bond, not just playing house or pretending. I want to be her mother in every way that matters. Something shifted in Daniel's chest, that careful wall he'd built around hope cracking just enough to let possibility leak through. She'd need to agree. This doesn't happen without her full consent. I wouldn't want it any other way. 2 months into their careful courtship, Evelyn started spending Saturday afternoons at Daniel's apartment. She'd arrive with groceries, always too much, always expensive brands that Daniel would never buy for himself, and help Mia with homework while Daniel caught up on laundry and bills. They fell into an easy rhythm, comfortable in ways that surprised all of them. Mia blossomed under the attention, soaking up Evelyn's genuine interest in her science projects and elaborate theories about extraterrestrial life. Evelyn, in turn, seemed to unwind in their cramped apartment, shedding the corporate polish that defined her professional life. Daniel watched them together, Mia explaining orbital mechanics with wild hand gestures while Evelyn listened with absolute focus, and felt something he'd thought died with Sarah stirring back to life. Not love, not yet, but maybe the foundation for it. Tell me about your wife, Evelyn said one evening after Mia had gone to bed. They were sitting on Daniel's worn couch, both nursing glasses of wine Evelyn had brought. If we're going to do this, I should know about her, about what you lost. Daniel's first instinct was to deflect, to offer the sanitized version he gave strangers. But Evelyn deserved better than performance. Sarah was... He paused, trying to find words adequate to the task. She was braver than me, always. She knew the pregnancy was high risk, knew the doctors were concerned about her heart condition. They offered to terminate, said it would be safer, but Sarah wanted Mia more than she wanted safety. His hands tightened on his wine glass. She made me promise that if something went wrong, I'd choose the baby. I tried to argue, but she was adamant. She'd already decided. Evelyn's hand found his, squeezing gently. You didn't get a choice. No. When the complications started, when they told me they could only save one, Daniel's breath hitched. She'd already made that choice for me. Already signed the paperwork. I just had to live with it. That's extraordinarily cruel, Evelyn said quietly, and extraordinarily loving. Both things can be true. 7 years, Daniel continued, needing to finish now that he'd started. 7 years of being grateful for Mia and angry at Sarah and guilty for being angry. 7 years of watching my daughter grow up brilliant and beautiful and wondering what Sarah would think, what she would say. 7 years of being so goddamn lonely, I sometimes forget what it feels like not to be. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, her thumb tracing circles on the back of his hand. I can't replace her. I need you to know that. I'm not trying to erase Sarah or pretend she didn't matter. I know, Daniel said. That's part of why this might work. You're not asking me to forget. You're just asking me to try again differently. Are we trying? Evelyn's voice carried a vulnerability he'd never heard before. Actually trying? Because I need to know if this is still theoretical or if we're genuinely moving toward something real. Daniel turned to face her fully, seeing past the polish to the woman beneath, lonely, hopeful, terrified of another rejection. He recognized her because he saw the same expression in his mirror every morning. I think we're trying, he said carefully. I think somewhere between coffee meetings and grocery shopping and watching you help Mia with her homework, this stopped being theoretical. I don't know if it's love yet, but it's something that feels like it could grow into what we need. Evelyn's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. That's the most hopeful thing anyone said to me in 9 years. Then we're both pathetic, Daniel said, but he was smiling when he said it. She leaned against his shoulder and he wrapped an arm around her, and they sat in comfortable silence while the city hummed beyond the windows. It wasn't romance, it wasn't the passionate connection movies promised, but it was real, and it was theirs, and maybe that was enough. 3 months into their arrangement, Evelyn broached the subject neither had wanted to address. We need to tell my parents, she said over their now standard Wednesday coffee. If we're serious about this, they need to know before we go any further. Otherwise, they'll feel ambushed, and that will make everything worse. Daniel's stomach clenched. When? Next Sunday. Family dinner at their house. It's a standing invitation. My sister and her family will be there, which might actually help. Harder for them to make a scene with witnesses. Evelyn's expression suggested she didn't entirely believe this. I'll warn them you're coming, that you're someone I'm seeing seriously. But Daniel, she reached across the table. You need to prepare yourself. My mother can be cutting when she wants to be. My father will interrogate you like a hostile witness. It won't be pleasant. Will Mia come? God, no, Evelyn said immediately. Not for the first meeting. I won't subject her to their judgment until I know they can be civil. This one's just you and me facing the firing squad together. The week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Daniel borrowed a suit from his coworker Marcus, who offered it with knowing sympathy and zero questions. He got a haircut he couldn't afford and shoes that pinched but looked acceptably professional. Saturday night, Mia helped him pick a tie. Selecting a blue one she declared made him look like a real dad from TV. Where are you going that's so fancy? She asked, smoothing down the tie with serious concentration. Evelyn's parents' house for dinner, Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady. They want to meet me. Mia's eyes went wide. Are they scary? Probably a little bit, Daniel admitted, but Evelyn will be there and we'll be fine. It's just dinner. You should bring flowers, Mia announced with absolute certainty. That's what they do in movies. The man always brings flowers for the mom. So Daniel showed up at Evelyn's building Sunday afternoon with a bouquet that had decimated his grocery budget, feeling like an imposter in borrowed clothes. Evelyn met him in the lobby, wearing a dress that probably cost more than his monthly rent, her expression carefully neutral. You look terrified, she observed. I am terrified, Daniel admitted. Good. Healthy fear will keep you sharp. She straightened his tie with practiced efficiency. Remember, my father will try to intimidate you with business talk and pointed questions about your career trajectory. My mother will make subtle observations about class and breeding. My sister will be performatively sweet while actually being condescending. And through it all, you just need to be yourself. Honest, direct, unwilling to pretend to be something you're not. That's the part that scares them, isn't it? Daniel said. That I won't perform properly. That's exactly what scares them, Evelyn confirmed. Ready? Absolutely not. Perfect. Let's go. The drive to her parents' house took them out of the city proper and into the kind of suburb where lawns were professionally maintained and property values had more zeros than Daniel could comfortably contemplate. The Cross family home was a sprawling colonial that looked like it had been transplanted from a country club magazine. White columns, perfect symmetry, windows that gleamed in the late afternoon sun. A woman who could only be Evelyn's mother answered the door, her smile polite and assessing in the same breath. Evelyn, darling, and you must be Daniel. She accepted the flowers with the graciousness of someone receiving tribute from a minor vassal. How thoughtful. Do come in. The interior matched the exterior. Tasteful, expensive, utterly impersonal. Family photos lined the walls in expensive frames, documenting Evelyn's childhood through private schools and European vacations. Daniel felt like he'd stepped into a museum dedicated to a life he couldn't begin to understand. Evelyn's father appeared from what was probably his study, tall and silver-haired and radiating the kind of authority that came from decades of boardroom dominance. Daniel Moore, Richard Cross. His handshake was firm enough to be a test. Evelyn tells us you work in IT. Systems administration at Sterling Solutions, Daniel confirmed, refusing to be cowed. I manage their network infrastructure and security protocols. Ah, technical work. Richard's tone suggested this was slightly beneath actual professional employment. And you've been with them how long? 8 years. I started in help desk and worked my way up to senior admin. Daniel met his gaze steadily. It's stable employment with good benefits, which matters when you're raising a child alone. Something flickered in Richard's expression. Respect or irritation, Daniel couldn't tell. Before he could respond, a blonde woman swept into the room with 3 children in tow, her smile bright and vaguely predatory. You must be Daniel. I'm Christine, Evelyn's sister, and this is my husband Brad and our children, Madison, Braden, and Kaylee. The children stared at Daniel with the blank assessment of those raised to judge social standing. We've heard so much about you. Well, not much really, since Evelyn's been so secretive about this whole thing. Christine, Evelyn said warnly. What? I'm just saying it's unusual for you to bring someone home. The last time was, oh, what was his name? The investment banker? That was years ago. 5 years, Evelyn said tightly. And we're not discussing him. Dinner was served in a dining room that could comfortably seat 20, though only the 8 of them gathered around the polished mahogany table. Daniel found himself seated between Evelyn's father and her brother-in-law Brad, who worked in wealth management and spent the first course explaining his recent golf club membership with excruciating detail. So Daniel, Richard said, cutting through Brad's monologue with practiced ease, Evelyn mentioned you're a widower with a daughter. That must present certain challenges. It presents responsibilities, Daniel corrected carefully. My daughter is the best thing in my life. She's not a challenge. Of course, of course. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. But surely you must find it difficult. Managing a career, childcare, household responsibilities, all without a partner's support. I manage, Daniel said simply. With help, I assume? Family? The child's mother's parents? Sarah's parents passed before Mia was born. My own family isn't involved. I have a neighbor who helps with emergency childcare, and Mia's in an excellent after-school program. Daniel refused to be ashamed of his situation. We make it work. Evelyn's mother joined the interrogation with surgical precision. And your daughter, Mia, is it? She must be quite young. 7, I believe Evelyn said? Yes, ma'am. She'll be 8 in March. Such a formative age, Margaret Cross mused, her tone suggesting this presented problems. Children need stability, structure. So much disruption in her young life already. Losing her mother, now her father dating. It must be quite confusing for the poor dear. Mia is remarkably resilient, Daniel said, fighting to keep his voice level. She understands that our family looks different than some others, and she's learning to be proud of that rather than ashamed of it. Pride is all well and good, Margaret continued, but children also need proper guidance, appropriate role models, exposure to, she gestured vaguely, the right environments. She has excellent teachers and a father who loves her, Daniel said, his patience fraying. That seems like a good start. Mother, Evelyn interjected, her voice carrying a warning edge, Daniel's parenting isn't up for discussion. I'm merely pointing out that blending families requires consideration of many factors, Margaret said smoothly. Cultural compatibility, educational values, social expectations, these things matter, darling, especially when... She paused delicately. When the backgrounds are quite different. The subtext was clear enough to cut glass. Daniel felt Evelyn tense beside him, her hand finding his under the table and squeezing hard. Christine chose this moment to add her contribution. I think it's wonderful that Evelyn is finally dating again, though I have to admit I'm surprised. You're quite different from her usual type. She caught herself, but the damage was done. I just mean, Evelyn usually dates professionals. Lawyers, executives, that sort of thing. People with pedigrees, Daniel said flatly. I understand. No one's saying that, Brad jumped in with false hardiness. It's just that Evelyn's in a certain position socially, career-wise. Her parents naturally want to ensure she's with someone who can, well, complement that. Someone who won't embarrass her at firm events, Daniel translated. Someone who knows which fork to use and how to make small talk about stock portfolios. The table went silent. Even the children stopped their fidgeting. Daniel, Richard said carefully, I don't think anyone is trying to insult you. No, Daniel agreed, setting down his fork with deliberate calm. You're just making it clear that I'm not good enough for your daughter because I didn't attend the right schools or join the right clubs or inherit the right connections. He looked directly at Margaret. And you're worried that my daughter, a 7-year-old child, isn't properly cultured enough to fit into your social circles. That's not... Margaret began. It is exactly what you're saying, Daniel interrupted. You're just too polite to say it directly. So let me be direct for all of us. He stood, his borrowed suit suddenly feeling like armor. I'm not from your world. I work for a living, I live paycheck to paycheck, and my daughter's mother died giving birth to her because we couldn't afford the kind of medical care that might have saved them both. I've spent 7 years being rejected by people who think single fathers are too much work, too complicated, too damaged to deserve a second chance at happiness. He turned to Evelyn, who was staring at him with wide eyes. I came here because you asked me to, because I thought maybe your parents deserved a chance to see past the surface to who I actually am. But I won't sit here while they insult my daughter or make you feel like choosing me as some kind of charitable act. Daniel pulled out his wallet and placed several bills on the table, enough to cover his portion of dinner he'd barely touched. Thank you for the meal. I can find my own way home. Daniel, wait. Evelyn was on her feet, but Daniel was already moving toward the door. He made it to the foyer before she caught up, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Don't leave, please. They'll never accept me, Evelyn. You have to see that. Daniel's voice cracked. And I won't put Mia through this. Won't let her be judged and found wanting by people who measure worth in country club memberships and stock portfolios. You're right, Evelyn said, and the agreement stopped him cold. They're being horrible, classist, unforgivable, and I should have shut it down sooner, defended you more forcefully. Her eyes blazed with something fierce. But if you leave now, you're letting them win. You're proving that I can't have both you and my family, that I have to choose. Maybe you do have to choose, Daniel said quietly. Maybe that's what this was always going to come down to. Then I choose you. Evelyn's voice rang clear and certain. I choose you and Mia and the life we're building together, but I'm not ready to give up on my parents yet. They're wrong, but they're also scared of losing me, scared of change, scared of anything that doesn't fit their narrow worldview. Give them a chance to do better. And if they don't, then I choose you anyway, Evelyn repeated. Every time, without question. Daniel searched her face, looking for doubt or hesitation, found only fierce determination and something that looked remarkably like love. "One more chance," he said finally, "but if they go after Mia, if they so much as suggest she's not good enough, we're done. I won't negotiate my daughter's worth." "Deal." Evelyn took his hand. "Now come back to that dining room and let me do what I should have done from the start. Make it absolutely clear that you're not up for discussion or debate. You're my choice, and they can either accept that or lose me." They returned to find the dining room in tense silence, Christine herding her children toward dessert, while Brad studied his phone with sudden fascination. Richard and Margaret sat frozen at the table, matching expressions of discomfort on their carefully maintained faces. Evelyn didn't sit down. "I need to say something, and I need everyone to listen without interruption." Her lawyer voice, cool, professional, absolutely unyielding. "Daniel is not some phase or questionable decision that requires your approval. He's a good man raising a remarkable child while building a life that has more integrity than most people in your country club will ever achieve." "Evelyn, we're just concerned," Margaret began. I said no interruptions. Evelyn's tone could have cut diamond. "For 9 years, I've listened to your concerns about my dating life, my biological limitations, my failure to produce grandchildren who meet your exacting standards. I've endured setups with appropriate men who found me defective and dating advice that boiled down to lowering my standards and hiding my limitations." She paused, letting the words land. "Daniel doesn't see me as defective. His daughter doesn't see me as a backup option or consolation prize. They see me as someone worth choosing, worth fighting for, worth building a family with, and I will not apologize for choosing them back." "We only want what's best for you," Richard said quietly. "Then be better," Evelyn shot back. "Be the parents who raised me to value character over credentials, who taught me that worth isn't measured in bank accounts or pedigrees. Be the people I can bring my family home to without worrying that my daughter—" She corrected herself deliberately. "That our daughter will be judged for not knowing which fork to use or not having the right last name." Margaret's expression shifted, something cracking in her carefully maintained composure. "You're serious about this man, genuinely serious." "I'm planning to marry him," Evelyn said simply. "We haven't set a date yet and I haven't officially proposed, but yes, I'm serious. This is happening. The only question is whether it happens with your blessing or without it." The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Finally, Richard cleared his throat. "Daniel," he said, his voice carrying a different quality now, less interrogation, more assessment. "I apologize. You're right that we were being unfair, making assumptions based on circumstances rather than character." He gestured to the empty chair. "Would you be willing to stay? Start this evening over." Daniel looked at Evelyn, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "One condition," he said. "You want to know about me, about my life, about whether I'm good enough for your daughter? Fine. Ask me anything. But we don't discuss Mia except to establish that she's loved, cared for, and not up for judgment. Understood?" "Understood," Richard agreed. They returned to the table, and the evening shifted into something resembling actual conversation rather than interrogation. Daniel talked about his work, his challenges as a single father, his hopes for the future. Richard shared stories about Evelyn's childhood that made her blush. Margaret softened fractionally, asking questions that suggested genuine interest rather than hostile assessment. It wasn't acceptance. Not yet. But it was a start. By the time they left, 3 hours later, Daniel's head ached from navigating conversational minefields, and Margaret had almost smiled when saying goodbye. Christine had been suspiciously quiet after Evelyn's speech, and Brad had switched from golf talk to actually asking about Daniel's work with something resembling real curiosity. In the car, Evelyn collapsed against the seat with an exhausted laugh. "That was a disaster. That was the worst dinner of my life," Daniel agreed. "And I once ate gas station sushi. I can't believe you walked out. I can't believe you came back. I can't believe you told them we're getting married." Daniel turned to face her. "We haven't actually discussed that part, the actual marriage part." Evelyn's confidence wavered. "I know, I may have gotten ahead of myself, but in the moment, with them judging you, judging us, I needed them to understand this isn't casual. This is my future. You're my future. She paused. If you want to be. Daniel thought about the evening, the judgment, the class warfare, the exhausting performance of proving his worth to people who started from a position of skepticism. He thought about going home to Mia, explaining where he'd been and what it meant. Thought about the future Evelyn was offering, complicated, difficult, requiring constant navigation of worlds that didn't quite fit together. He thought about being alone, about another decade of failed dates and growing isolation, about Mia asking why no one wanted them. I want to be, he said finally. Your future, Mia's and mine, all of it, even the impossible parts. Evelyn's smile blazed bright enough to light the car's interior. Even my terrible parents? Even your terrible parents, Daniel confirmed, though I'm drawing the line at country club memberships. Deal. They drove back to the city in comfortable silence, both processing what they'd just committed to. At Daniel's building, Evelyn walked him to the door, their hands linked. Thank you, she said quietly. For staying, for fighting, for not letting them make you small. Thank you for choosing me, Daniel replied. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, Evelyn corrected. She leaned in, and Daniel met her halfway, their first real kiss, soft and tentative and full of promise. Upstairs, Mrs. Chen reported that Mia had been perfect, had done her homework without complaint, and was now asleep with her science textbook under her pillow. Daniel paid her and locked the door, moving quietly to Mia's room. His daughter was exactly as described, sprawled across her bed, the textbook indeed tucked beneath her pillow, like other children kept stuffed animals. Daniel carefully extracted it, marked her page, and pulled the blanket up to her chin. How was dinner? Mia mumbled, not quite awake. Complicated, Daniel admitted, but we survived. Did they like you? Not yet, but they might learn to. That's okay, Mia said sleepily. Evelyn likes you. That's what matters. Out of the mouths of children, Daniel thought, comes the truth the rest of us spend years learning to accept. Go back to sleep, astronaut, he whispered, kissing her forehead. Love you, Dad. Love you too, Mia. More than anything. As he closed her door and moved to his own room, Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. My mother just called. She wants to meet Mia, properly, at our place, without my father's interrogation tactics. Is that something you'd consider? Daniel stared at the message, weighing the risks and possibilities. Then he typed, Saturday afternoon, our apartment, 2 hours maximum. And if she makes Mia feel less than perfect, she leaves immediately. Fair terms. I'll make it happen. And Daniel, tonight mattered. What you did, what you said, it mattered to me more than I can properly express. We're in this together now. That means fighting together, too. Together, Evelyn confirmed. I like the sound of that. Daniel set his phone aside and lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in the past 4 months, the impossible proposition had become possible. The theoretical arrangement had grown into something real, something worth fighting for. It still wasn't love. Not quite. But it was close enough to see the shape of it on the horizon, approaching like dawn after a long night. And for the first time in 7 years, Daniel let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, the sun would actually rise. Margaret Cross arrived at Daniel's apartment building on Saturday afternoon in a car that probably cost more than 3 years of his salary, her driver waiting at the curb while she studied the modest brick exterior with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. He watched from the third-floor window as she smoothed her designer coat and checked her reflection in the building's glass door before entering. Evelyn stood beside him, tension radiating from her shoulders. She's going to hate it, Evelyn muttered. The neighborhood, the building, the size of the apartment. She's going to make some comment about square footage or property values, and I'm going to lose my mind. Then we'll lose our minds together, Daniel said, squeezing her hand. Behind them, Mia was arranging cookies on a plate with the intense concentration she brought to everything, determined to make a good impression on the grandmother she didn't yet know she was meeting. The knock came precisely 3 minutes later, polite but firm, the knock of someone accustomed to having doors opened promptly. Daniel answered to find Margaret holding a large box from an expensive bakery, her smile practiced and slightly uncertain. Daniel, thank you for having me. She glanced past him into the apartment, and he watched her catalog everything in a single sweeping look. The worn furniture, the cramped space, the science fair projects taking up half the living room. Her expression remained carefully neutral. I brought dessert. I wasn't sure what a 7-year-old might enjoy. That's very kind of you, Daniel said, stepping back to let her enter. Mia loves anything with chocolate. Evelyn emerged from the kitchen, her casual clothes a deliberate statement that this was their territory, not her mother's. Mother, you found it all right? Your directions were quite clear. Margaret set the bakery box on the counter, her movements precise and controlled. Then she turned toward Mia, who had stopped arranging cookies and was studying this new stranger with open curiosity. For a long moment, the two assessed each other, Margaret with her tailored perfection and measured composure, Mia with her rumpled NASA t-shirt and direct, uncompromising gaze. Daniel held his breath, ready to intervene at the first sign of condescension. You must be Mia, Margaret said, her voice softer than Daniel had heard at dinner. I'm Mrs. Cross, Evelyn's mother. Are you going to be my grandma? Mia asked with the blunt honesty that made adults uncomfortable. Because Evelyn said you might not like us very much, but Dad said we should give you a chance anyway. Evelyn made a strangled sound. Daniel wanted to sink through the floor. Margaret's perfectly composed expression cracked, something raw and almost vulnerable flashing across her face. She seemed to gather herself. I would very much like to be your grandmother, if you'd be willing to let me try. Though I understand I need to earn that privilege rather than assume it. Mia considered this with her usual thoughtful deliberation. Do you know about space? Not particularly, Margaret admitted. I'm afraid my knowledge is quite limited. That's okay, Mia decided. I can teach you. Do you want to see my project on the Mars rovers? I have pictures and everything. Just like that, Mia grabbed Margaret's hand and pulled her toward the science display covering half the living room wall, chattering about curiosity and perseverance and the possibility of microbial life in ancient Martian lake beds. Margaret followed, her designer heels clicking on the worn linoleum, her expression shifting from uncertainty to something Daniel couldn't quite identify. Evelyn collapsed against the counter. Did my daughter just voluntarily hold my mother's hand? Your mother just admitted she doesn't know something, Daniel countered. I think we've entered an alternate dimension. They watched from the kitchen as Mia explained her project with wild enthusiasm, Margaret asking surprisingly thoughtful questions about sample collection and atmospheric composition. The older woman had crouched down to Mia's level, her expensive dress pooling on the floor, completely absorbed in a 7-year-old's passionate lecture about planetary science. She wanted children, Evelyn said quietly. My mother, I mean. She tried for years before having me and Christine. Multiple miscarriages, fertility treatments that didn't work, doctors who told her she'd never carried a term. When she finally had us, she poured everything into making sure we had perfect lives, perfect schools, perfect opportunities, perfect futures. She paused. I think seeing Mia, knowing I could have this after all, it's complicated for her. Daniel understood complicated. Understood the way hope and fear could tangle until you couldn't separate one from the other. Does she know about Mia potentially being adopted? Not yet, but I think... Evelyn gestured toward where Margaret was now examining Mia's carefully labeled drawings of the Mars rover's drilling equipment. I think she's starting to understand what she almost dismissed. The afternoon unfolded with surprising ease. Margaret asked intelligent questions about Mia's interests, her school, her favorite subjects. She listened when Mia explained the challenges of being the only kid in her class being raised by a single parent, nodding thoughtfully when Mia described feeling different from her classmates. Different isn't bad, Margaret said carefully. Sometimes different means you're learning things other children won't understand until they're much older, like resilience and independence and what really matters in a family. That's what Dad says, Mia agreed. He says being different makes me special, not weird. Your father is absolutely right. Margaret glanced at Daniel, something like apology in her expression. You're very fortunate to have a father who sees your worth so clearly. Over tea and the expensive pastries Margaret had brought, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Mia's upcoming school play, her dreams of becoming an astronaut, her elaborate theories about what aliens might look like if they existed. Margaret shared stories about Evelyn as a child, describing a serious little girl who organized her toys by size and color and lectured her teddy bears on proper courtroom procedure. "You were always so certain about everything," Margaret said to Evelyn, affection warming her voice. "Even at 5 years old, you knew exactly who you were and what you wanted. It drove your father to distraction because you couldn't be persuaded or bribed or convinced to change your mind once you'd decided something." "I wonder where I got that from," Evelyn said dryly, and Margaret had the grace to smile. As the afternoon wore on, Daniel began to relax fractionally. Margaret wasn't warm exactly, but she was trying, asking genuine questions, laughing at Mia's jokes, carefully avoiding any comments about the apartment's size or location. When Mia spilled juice on her expensive dress, Margaret simply blotted it with a napkin and continued their conversation as if nothing had happened. But the real test came when Mia, emboldened by Margaret's attention, asked the question Daniel had been dreading. "If you become my grandma, does that mean I'm good enough now? Dad said some people think I'm too much work because my mom died and he's just one person. Is that what you thought too?" The room went utterly silent. Margaret's teacup froze halfway to her lips, her expression shifting through shock to something that looked like shame. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, setting down the cup with trembling hands. No. You were never not good enough. Never. If I gave you that impression, if anything I said or did made you feel less than absolutely precious," her voice cracked. "I was wrong. Terribly, inexcusably wrong." Mia studied her with those unnervingly perceptive eyes. "So, you don't think Dad's a bad choice for Evelyn because of me?" "I think your father is making my daughter happier than I've seen her in years," Margaret said carefully. "And I think you're a remarkable young lady who any grandparent would be honored to know. She glanced at Daniel, then Evelyn, clearly struggling. "I was scared. Scared of losing my daughter to a life I didn't understand, scared of changes I couldn't control. But fear doesn't excuse cruelty, and I was cruel at that dinner, to both you and your father." "Adults make mistakes too," Mia said with the wisdom of someone who'd learned to forgive small failings. "Dad says the important thing is trying to do better next time." "Your father," Margaret said, looking directly at Daniel for the first time with something approaching respect, "is clearly an excellent parent who's raised an exceptionally gracious child." Daniel's throat tightened. "Thank you. That means more than you probably realize." The visit extended past the planned 2 hours, stretching into early evening as Margaret showed no signs of wanting to leave. She helped Mia with homework, offering perspective on a history assignment about family traditions that had been causing Mia anxiety. She asked Daniel about his work with genuine interest rather than veiled condescension. She even admired the cramped efficiency of the apartment's layout, noting how everything had been optimized for functionality. When she finally prepared to leave, Mia hugged her spontaneously, wrapping small arms around Margaret's waist. "You can come back if you want. I can teach you more about space stuff." Margaret's eyes went bright with unshed tears. "I would like that very much." She looked at Daniel over Mia's head. "If your father says it's all right." "You're welcome any time," Daniel said, surprised to find he meant it. Though fair warning, Mia's lecture on black holes is approximately 90 minutes long and highly detailed. "I'll prepare myself accordingly," Margaret said with the ghost of a smile. She straightened, smoothing her dress, rebuilding her composure. "Evelyn, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" They stepped into the hallway, leaving Daniel and Mia to clean up the tea service. Through the thin walls, Daniel could hear the murmur of conversation, but not the actual words. When Evelyn returned 10 minutes later, her eyes were red-rimmed, but her expression was lighter than he'd seen in weeks. "She apologized," Evelyn said once they were alone in the kitchen, Mia absorbed in her homework at the table. "Actually apologized for the dinner, for her assumptions about you, for making this harder than it needed to be. She said," Evelyn's voice wavered, "she said watching you with Mia made her realize what she'd almost cost me by being stubborn and prejudiced." "People can surprise you," Daniel said softly. "She wants to meet with my father, convince him to give you another chance. A real chance. without the interrogation tactics. Evelyn leaned against him, and Daniel wrapped his arms around her. I didn't expect that. Any of it. Neither did I, Daniel admitted. I was prepared for disaster. Instead, we got hope? Evelyn tilted her head to look up at him. Is that allowed? Are we allowed to hope this might actually work? I think we have to, Daniel said. Hope's the only thing that's gotten us this far. They stood together in the small kitchen while Mia hummed to herself over her homework, the domestic simplicity of the moment almost overwhelming in its ordinariness. This was what they were building toward. These quiet evenings, these small intimacies, this careful construction of family from the raw materials of loneliness and determination. Over the following weeks, Margaret became a surprising ally. She invited them to dinner again, this time at a restaurant of Daniel's choosing, a family-friendly Italian place where Mia could be a normal kid without worrying about proper fork usage. She brought Richard along, who was notably less hostile than their first encounter, asking Daniel about network security with what seemed like genuine professional interest rather than testing his expertise. The shift was gradual, but unmistakable. Christine remained skeptical, but at least stopped making pointed comments about Evelyn's unusual choice. Brad attempted male bonding conversations about sports that Daniel politely navigated despite knowing nothing about golf or tennis. Even the children warmed to Mia once they discovered she could explain why their video games lagged and how to optimize their Wi-Fi connection. Through it all, Daniel and Evelyn continued building their relationship with the same methodical care they'd started with. Coffee dates that had evolved into actual dates, weekend afternoons that stretched into evenings, conversations that moved from logistics to dreams to fears to the vulnerable spaces between. They hadn't slept together, both agreeing it was too soon, too complicated with Mia in the equation. But the physical attraction was there, simmering beneath careful restraint, manifesting in lingering touches and stolen kisses that promised future intimacy. I'm falling for you, Evelyn admitted one night after Mia had gone to bed, the words tumbling out like a confession. This was supposed to be practical, a logical solution to mutual problems. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being theoretical and started being real. And I'm terrified because I've never felt this before. Not even close. Daniel pulled her closer on the couch, his heart hammering against his ribs. I know, I'm scared too, because if this doesn't work, if something goes wrong, it won't just hurt us, Evelyn finished. It'll hurt Mia, and I won't do that to her. She's already lost so much. So we don't let it fail, Daniel said with more confidence than he felt. We fight for this. We build it right, brick by brick, until it's strong enough to last. Is that possible? Building love intentionally instead of falling into it? I don't know, Daniel admitted, but I think maybe we're doing it anyway. Maybe we've been doing it since that first conversation in the restaurant. Evelyn kissed him then, deep and searching, and Daniel responded with 7 years of pent-up longing channeled into careful restraint. They pulled apart breathless, foreheads touching, both understanding without words that they were standing on a precipice together. I need to tell you something, Daniel said quietly. About Sarah, about Mia's birth. The whole story, not just the sanitized version. So he told her everything, the difficult pregnancy, Sarah's determination to continue despite medical warnings, the emergency that had turned routine monitoring into catastrophic crisis. He described the impossible choice that wasn't really a choice at all because Sarah had already decided. The delivery room where he'd become a father and a widower in the same breath. The years afterward, when he'd alternated between fierce love for his daughter and resentful grief for his wife, hating himself for both emotions. I was angry at her for so long, Daniel said, the admission painful even now. Angry that she'd chosen Mia over herself, over us, over our future together. Angry that she'd left me alone with this impossible responsibility I wasn't prepared for. And then guilty for being angry, because Mia was right there being perfect and beautiful and everything Sarah wanted. It took me years to untangle those feelings enough to just be her father without all the complicated grief underneath. Evelyn listened without interrupting, her hand never leaving his. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Thank you for telling me, she said finally, for trusting me with all of it, not just the pretty parts. She paused. I need you to understand something, though. I will never try to replace Sarah. Mia's mother made the ultimate sacrifice to give her life, and that's sacred. If I become Mia's legal mother, I'm not erasing Sarah. I'm adding myself to the family she started. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Daniel said, his voice rough. Sarah would approve of you, I think. She'd appreciate your directness, your refusal to pretend at things you don't feel. She'd want Mia to have someone like you. I hope so, Evelyn said softly, because I'm getting attached to that kid in ways I didn't expect. The way she looks at the world, the questions she asks, the absolute certainty she has about her own worth despite everything that's tried to tell her otherwise. She's extraordinary, Daniel. You raised someone extraordinary. We're going to raise her together, Daniel said, the future tense deliberate, if you still want to. I want to, Evelyn confirmed, more than I've wanted anything in years. They sat together in the dimly lit apartment, the city humming beyond the windows, both understanding that they'd crossed some invisible threshold into commitment. There was no dramatic proposal, no grand gesture, just two lonely people choosing each other with full knowledge of the costs and complications involved. But the peaceful momentum they'd built shattered 2 weeks later when Richard Cross called an unexpected family meeting. Evelyn arrived at her parents' house with visible tension, Daniel and Mia in tow because she'd insisted they face whatever was coming together. They found the entire family assembled, Christine and Brad with their children, Margaret looking worried, Richard standing by the fireplace with the bearing of a man about to deliver a verdict. Thank you all for coming, Richard said once everyone was settled. I've asked you here because there's a matter that needs to be addressed before it goes any further. His gaze landed on Daniel with uncomfortable intensity. Daniel, I've had a private investigator conduct a background check on you. The room went cold. Evelyn shot to her feet, fury radiating from every line of her body. You did what? I needed to be certain, Richard said calmly. My daughter is considering marrying a man we barely know, bringing a child into our family whose background is equally unknown. I had a responsibility to ensure there were no complications. Complications, Daniel repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. He was aware of Mia beside him, her small hand finding his, her confusion palpable. You investigated me, like I'm some kind of criminal. It's standard practice for families of means, Richard said, as if this made it acceptable. And I found several concerning items that I believe need clarification before this relationship progresses further. Evelyn looked like she might physically attack her father. Stop talking right now before you say something unforgivable. Your father has a right to protect you, Margaret interjected, though her expression suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with this approach. Let him finish. Fine, Evelyn said through clenched teeth. Finish. Get it all out so Daniel can hear exactly what you think of him. Richard pulled out a folder, and Daniel's stomach dropped. Your financial situation is precarious at best. Significant credit card debt, multiple medical bills and collections, no savings to speak of. You're one emergency away from bankruptcy. He flipped a page. Your employment history shows you've been passed over for promotions 3 times in the past 5 years, despite apparently solid performance. Your apartment building has multiple code violations, and your daughter's school records indicate she's been to the nurse's office 14 times this year for various minor illnesses, suggesting either neglect or... That's enough. Daniel stood, his voice cutting through Richard's recitation like a blade. Mia clutched his hand tighter, her eyes wide. You want clarification? Fine. My credit card debt is from Sarah's medical bills and funeral costs that insurance didn't cover. The medical bills and collections are from Mia's broken arm 2 years ago when she fell off playground equipment. I'm paying them off slowly because that's all I can afford. I have no savings because every spare dollar goes to my daughter's needs before my own. He was shaking now, fury and humiliation warring in his chest. I've been passed over for promotions because I won't work overtime or travel for business. I have a child who needs me home every evening. The apartment building has violations because it's all I can afford in a neighborhood with good schools. And Mia goes to the nurse because she has mild asthma exacerbated by seasonal allergies, and the school nurse is kind enough to let her rest when she's having a bad day rather than sending her home to miss class. Daniel turned to Evelyn, everything inside him breaking. This is what I was afraid of. This is exactly why people like me don't belong in worlds like yours. Because we can't hide our failures or explain away our struggles with enough money and connections. We just fail out loud where everyone can see. Daniel, please. Evelyn reached for him, but he stepped back. I'm sorry, he said, the words directed at Mia rather than anyone else. I tried. I really tried to make this work, but I can't. I won't put you through this. Won't let you grow up watching your father be humiliated and found wanting by people who measure worth in bank balances. He looked at Evelyn, his heart shattering. You deserve better than this. Better than me. Better than the constant struggle. Better than having to defend your choices to your family for the rest of your life. Find someone who fits your world, someone who won't embarrass you at firm events or make your father hire investigators to prove he's good enough. You are good enough. Evelyn's voice broke on the words. You're more than enough. You're everything I want. But I'm not what you need, Daniel said gently. And Mia deserves more than being the poor relation everyone tolerates out of obligation to you. He took Mia's hand and headed for the door, ignoring Evelyn's protests, Margaret's stricken expression, even Richard's attempt to call him back. In the car, Mia was silent, her small face crumpled with confusion and hurt. Are we not getting a family anymore? She asked finally, her voice small and broken in a way Daniel had never heard. The question destroyed him completely. I don't think so, baby. I'm sorry. I tried to make it work, but sometimes things are just too different to fit together, right? But I liked Evelyn, Mia said, tears spilling over. She was nice to me. She didn't pretend. She was going to be my mom. I know, Daniel whispered, his own vision blurring. I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. They drove home in wretched silence, and Daniel helped Mia into her pajamas like she was much younger than 7, both of them needing the comfort of familiar rituals. He tucked her in and sat on the edge of her bed, stroking her hair while she cried herself to sleep. Mrs. Chen found him sitting in the dark living room an hour later, staring at nothing. She'd heard the car arrive, heard Mia crying, and let herself in with the spare key Daniel had given her for emergencies. What happened? She asked gently, sitting beside him. Daniel told her everything, the investigation, the litany of his failures laid out like evidence, the choice he'd made to walk away before Mia could be hurt further. Mrs. Chen listened without judgment, her weathered hand patting his with the comfort of someone who'd survived her own share of heartbreak. You're a fool, she said when he finished, but her tone was kind. A noble fool, but a fool nonetheless. I can't let Mia grow up feeling lesser, Daniel said. Can't let her think she has to earn the right to be loved by being perfect enough to overcome her background. So instead you teach her that love quits when things get hard, Mrs. Chen countered. That when people judge you unfairly, you run away rather than fight back. Is that the lesson you want her to learn? Daniel's head snapped up. That's not... I'm protecting her. You're protecting yourself, Mrs. Chen corrected gently. From more rejection, more humiliation, more proof that you're not good enough. But that little girl in there? She gestured toward Mia's room. She doesn't need protection from judgment. She needs to see her father stand up and refuse to be diminished. She needs to see that love is worth fighting for even when people try to tear it apart. Evelyn's better off without us dragging her down, Daniel insisted, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Have you asked Evelyn what she thinks about that? Mrs. Chen stood, her movements carrying the stiffness of age. Or did you make that decision for her the same way your wife decided to die without giving you a choice? The comparison hit like a physical blow. Daniel sat frozen as Mrs. Chen let herself out, leaving him alone with thoughts he'd been avoiding for 7 years. Sarah had chosen for both of them, had decided that he'd be fine raising Mia alone, that he was strong enough and capable enough to handle single parenthood without her. She'd been wrong. He'd survived, but barely, cobbling together a life from sheer stubborn determination and Mrs. Chen's kindness and Mia's unconscious resilience. And now he was doing the same thing to Evelyn, deciding for both of them that she couldn't handle the judgment, the struggle, the constant navigation of 2 incompatible worlds, taking away her choice because he was too scared to keep fighting. His phone buzzed with a text, then another, then a third, all from Evelyn. Please call me. We need to talk about what happened. My father was completely out of line. I told him so in terms that probably require years of therapy to recover from. I'm not giving up on us. I hope you're not either. Daniel stared at the messages, his chest tight with conflicting emotions. Another text arrived. Mia deserves to see you fight for what you want instead of running when things get hard. You deserve that too. We all do. The words echoed Mrs. Chen's, hitting the same bruised place in his heart. Behind him, Mia's door creaked open. His daughter appeared in her NASA pajamas, her face blotchy from crying, her expression more serious than any 7-year-old should have to be. I heard you talking to Mrs. Chen, Mia said quietly. About teaching me lessons. Daniel's heart sank. You should be asleep. I can't sleep, Mia said. She climbed onto the couch beside him, curling into his side like she had when she was much smaller. Dad, are you giving up because you're scared, or because you really think it won't work? The question was too perceptive, too knowing. Both, I guess. But you always tell me that being scared is okay as long as you try anyway, Mia said. You said that before my science fair presentation when I was nervous. You said being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the thing even though you are. That's different. Why? Mia looked up at him with Sarah's eyes, asking the hard questions neither of them wanted to face. Because you're a grown-up? Because grown-ups aren't supposed to be scared? Because I'm your father, Daniel said helplessly. I'm supposed to protect you from getting hurt. But I'm already hurt, Mia pointed out with devastating honesty. Walking away hurt me. Not having Evelyn anymore hurts. So if protecting me means I lose her anyway, what's the point? Daniel had no answer for that. His daughter, 7 years old and wiser than he'd ever been, had identified the fatal flaw in his protective reasoning. He'd left to shield her from future pain while inflicting immediate pain instead. The math didn't work. The sacrifice was meaningless. What if her family never accepts us? He asked quietly. What if every family gathering is like tonight, judgment, an investigation, and constant proof that we don't measure up? Then we don't go to those, Mia said simply. We make our own family with just us and Evelyn, and maybe Mrs. Chen because she's basically grandma anyway. And if her family wants to join our family later, they can, but only if they're nice. The 7-year-old solution to complex adult problems: establish boundaries, enforce consequences, build the family you want rather than accepting the one you're given. It was simultaneously naive and profound, the kind of clarity that only came from not yet learning all the reasons why things were complicated. You really like Evelyn, Daniel said. It wasn't quite a question. I love her, Mia corrected. She listens when I talk about science stuff. She doesn't pretend to know things she doesn't. She makes you smile like you used to in pictures with Mom. And she picked me, Dad. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Nobody ever picked me before except you. The words shattered what remained of Daniel's resolve. He pulled Mia close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. This child, this remarkable human being he'd somehow managed not to completely damage despite all his failures. She was right. Evelyn had chosen them, had stood up to her family, had fought for their place in her life, had promised to never make Mia feel less than wanted. And he'd walked away because a man with an investigator had listed his failures in a folder. You're right, Daniel said finally. You're absolutely right, and I've been an idiot. A noble idiot, Mia quoted Mrs. Chen, then giggled at her own joke despite the tears still drying on her cheeks. Are you going to call Evelyn back? I'm going to do better than that, Daniel said, an idea forming with crystalline clarity. But first I need to ask you something important. If I fight for this, really fight, even when it's hard and people are mean and things get complicated, are you ready to fight too? Because it won't always be easy. Nothing good is easy, Mia said with the certainty of someone quoting wisdom she'd learned from experience. That's what you told me about learning multiplication tables, and about making friends after Mom died, and about being the kid with only one parent. She looked up at him seriously. We've done lots of hard things already, Dad. We can do this one too. Out of the mouths of children, Daniel thought for the 100th time, comes the courage adults have spent years learning to suppress. He picked up his phone and called Evelyn. She answered on the first ring, her voice raw and thick with tears. "Daniel." "I'm sorry," he said, the words inadequate but necessary. "I'm sorry for walking out, for making decisions without you, for letting fear win when I should have been fighting. I was wrong." "You were protecting Mia," Evelyn said, understanding layered beneath the hurt. "I get it. I hate it, but I get it." "I was protecting myself," Daniel corrected, Mrs. Chen's words still echoing in his mind. "Mia's the one who set me straight. 7 years old and she's got more courage than I do." He paused, looking down at his daughter, who was watching him with anxious hope. "She wants to know if you're still willing to have us. Both of us. Even after the disaster with your father." "Of course I am," Evelyn said immediately, her voice breaking. "I told my father exactly what I thought of his investigation and his presumptions. I told him that if he couldn't see your worth, couldn't recognize that raising an extraordinary child while building a decent life from nothing is more impressive than any country club membership, then he didn't deserve to be part of our family." She took a shaky breath. "My mother agreed with me, actually. She was furious with him for undermining everything she'd been building with Mia." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. "Your mother stood up for us?" She told him that running a background check on the man her grandchild loves was the behavior of someone more concerned with appearances than actual family, Evelyn said, and Daniel could hear the smile beneath her tears. "I've never seen her that angry. Christine looked like she was watching a car crash. It was actually kind of magnificent." Despite everything, Daniel laughed. "I would have paid to see that." "Come back," Evelyn said quietly. "Tomorrow. We need to talk about this properly. Figure out how we move forward. But please don't make me do this without you. I won't go back to being alone. Not now that I know what we could have." "Tomorrow," Daniel agreed. "Your place or mine?" "Neutral ground," Evelyn decided. "That coffee shop where this whole thing started getting real. 10 o'clock, and bring Mia if she wants to come. She should be part of this conversation too." After they hung up, Daniel found Mia still watching him with that intense focus she brought to everything important. "We're meeting her tomorrow," he said, "to talk about what happens next, to figure out how to make this work even when it's complicated." "Good," Mia said, satisfied. "Because I already told her I loved her, and it would be super awkward if we never saw her again." "You told her you loved her?" Daniel's heart stuttered. "When?" "Last week when you were working late and she came over to help with my homework," Mia said matter-of-factly. "I asked her if she was going to be my mom for real, and she said she wanted to be if that was okay with me. So I said yes and that I loved her. She cried a little bit, but in a happy way." Daniel pulled his daughter close again, overwhelmed by her capacity for both honesty and affection. "You're braver than me, you know that?" "I know," Mia said without a trace of arrogance. "But you're getting better." The next morning found them back at the coffee shop where Daniel and Evelyn had first negotiated the terms of their impossible arrangement. Evelyn was already waiting at their usual corner table, 2 coffees and a hot chocolate with extra marshmallows arrayed like an offering. She looked exhausted, her eyes shadowed with sleeplessness, but her expression brightened when she saw them enter. Mia ran to her immediately, wrapping small arms around Evelyn's waist. "I'm sorry about your dad being mean," she said, muffled against Evelyn's sweater. "But I still want you to be my mom if you still want to." Evelyn's composure shattered completely. She crouched down to Mia's level, tears streaming freely. "I still want to. More than anything, I'm so sorry you had to hear all those horrible things about your dad. None of them were true. Not the way they made them sound." "I know Dad's good," Mia said with absolute certainty. "People who don't know that are just wrong." She pulled back to look at Evelyn seriously. "But are you sure? Because your family is really fancy and we're just regular. That's going to be weird sometimes." "I'm sure," Evelyn said, brushing Mia's hair back from her face with tender fingers. "And you know what? I've been fancy my whole life and it's been pretty lonely. I think regular might be exactly what I need." Mia considered this, then nodded. "Okay, but you have to promise something." "Anything." "You can't leave just because things get hard," Mia said, and Daniel saw his own fears reflected in his daughter's words. "If you're going to be my mom, you have to stay even when it's complicated, because I don't want another mom who goes away." The request landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through all of them. Evelyn's face crumpled with understanding, with recognition of what she was being asked to promise. To not die, to not disappear, to not abandon this child who'd already lost too much. "I promise," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I will stay. Through hard things and complicated things and frustrating things, I will stay and fight for us and for you and for this family we're building. I promise, Mia." "Okay." Mia hugged her again, then climbed into the chair beside her and reached for her hot chocolate. "So what do we do about your dad?" Daniel had to hand it to his daughter. She had a gift for cutting through emotional moments to practical concerns. Evelyn laughed wetly, wiping her eyes, and turned to include Daniel in the conversation. "That's what we need to figure out," she said, "together. Because I won't pretend my father's behavior was acceptable, but I also don't want to write him off completely if there's a chance he can do better." "He hired someone to investigate me," Daniel said, the hurt still fresh. "To prove I wasn't good enough for you, that's not something you just get over." "I know," Evelyn said quietly, "and I told him as much. But he called me last night after you and I talked, and he actually apologized. A real apology, not a corporate non-apology. He said fear made him act like an executive instead of a father, trying to solve a problem that didn't exist instead of trusting my judgment." Daniel wanted to hold on to his anger, wanted to use Richard's transgression as a shield against future hurt. But he could hear Mrs. Chen's voice in his head, Mia's wisdom about fighting for hard things, his own understanding that people deserve chances to do better. "What did you tell him?" he asked. "That he needed to apologize to you, not me," Evelyn said. "That whatever relationship we have going forward depends entirely on whether he can treat you with the respect you deserve, and that if he ever makes Mia feel less than completely wanted again, he'll have lost both his daughter and his chance at a grandchild permanently." "Wow," Mia said, impressed. "You were really mad at him." "I was furious," Evelyn confirmed. "I am still furious, but I'm also trying to remember that people make mistakes when they're scared, and that everyone deserves a chance to learn from them." She looked at Daniel. "He wants to meet with you, just you and him, no audience, no pressure, to apologize in person and hear what you need from him going forward." Daniel's first instinct was to refuse. The memory of sitting in that dining room while Richard listed his failures was still too raw, too painful. But refusing would be doing exactly what he'd done last night, running from difficulty instead of facing it. "What do you think?" he asked Mia, including her in the decision. "I think mean people should say sorry when they're mean," Mia said pragmatically. "And I think if he's really sorry, he should prove it by being nice next time. But if he's just saying sorry so Evelyn stops being mad at him, then forget it." "How do we tell the difference?" Daniel asked. "We give him a chance and see what he does," Mia said with a shrug. "That's what you always tell me about kids at school who are sometimes mean. Give them a chance to do better, and if they don't, then you know they're not worth being friends with." Out of the mouths of children, Daniel thought again, comes wisdom adults spend years complicating. "Okay," he said to Evelyn, "I'll meet with him, but not at his house or his office, or anywhere that puts me at a disadvantage, somewhere neutral. And I need you to understand that if he does this again, if he investigates me or judges me or treats me like I'm not good enough, I'm done. I won't keep putting myself through that." "Fair terms," Evelyn agreed. "I'll set it up for this week. And Daniel, thank you for being willing to try even after what he did. It means more than I can express." They spent the rest of the morning mapping out a plan, not just for Richard, but for their entire future. They talked about timelines, about when Evelyn might officially move in, about how to handle the adoption process when they were ready. They discussed finances with brutal honesty, Evelyn offering to pay off Daniel's medical debt, and Daniel initially refusing before Mia pointed out that families help each other, and pride was dumb if it meant they couldn't afford things they needed. "We need to be a team," Evelyn said firmly. "That means sharing burdens, not keeping score of who contributes what. Your debt is from keeping Mia healthy and burying Sarah with dignity. Those aren't failures, they're evidence of your priorities. Let me help carry that weight." It went against every instinct Daniel had, every lesson about self-sufficiency and not being a burden. But he could see the logic in Evelyn's argument. could recognize his own pride as the obstacle it was. More importantly, he could see Mia watching him, learning whether family meant sharing vulnerability or pretending to have everything under control. "Okay," he said finally. "We tackle it together. But I'm paying you back somehow. Maybe not in money, but in time or effort or whatever we figure out equals partnership." "Deal," Evelyn said, and the relief in her expression suggested this had been a test he'd nearly failed by refusing. They talked about Mia's education, about whether she should stay at her current school or transfer somewhere with better resources. They discussed holidays and how to navigate two family traditions, Evelyn's elaborate formal celebrations and Daniel's modest, practical approach. They even broached the subject of marriage itself, acknowledging that they'd been moving toward it without actually formalizing the commitment. "I don't need a big wedding," Evelyn said. "I don't need my parents' approval or a country club reception. I just need you and Mia and the certainty that we're building something real." "I want to propose properly," Daniel said, "not because you beat me to it at your parents' house, but because I'm choosing this. Choosing you. That deserves to be marked somehow." "No pressure," Evelyn teased, but her eyes were soft. "Whenever you're ready, we've got time." By the time they left the coffee shop 3 hours later, they had the skeleton of a plan and the beginnings of genuine confidence that they could make this work. Mia was chattering about whether she'd be a flower girl at the wedding or if that was too babyish for almost 8, and Evelyn was seriously considering the question while Daniel marveled at how quickly his daughter had accepted this new reality. The meeting with Richard happened on Thursday evening at a quiet restaurant Daniel had chosen specifically because it was familiar territory. He'd taken Mia there for birthday dinners, knew the staff, felt comfortable in the space. Richard arrived exactly on time, looking uncomfortable in casual clothes that probably still cost more than Daniel's entire wardrobe. "Thank you for coming," Richard said as they settled into a booth. "I wasn't certain you would." "I almost didn't," Daniel admitted. "But my daughter pointed out that people deserve chances to do better. And my neighbor reminded me that running away doesn't solve problems." "Wise daughter and neighbor," Richard observed. He was quiet for a moment, clearly wrestling with something. "I owe you an apology. A real one, without excuses or justifications. What I did was wrong, hiring an investigator, presenting your private struggles as evidence of unworthiness, treating your legitimate challenges as character flaws. It was cruel and classist and completely inappropriate." Daniel waited, not willing to make this easier for him. "I was scared," Richard continued. "My daughter is the most competent person I know. She's brilliant and successful and has never needed anyone's help to navigate life. Watching her choose you, choose a life that looked nothing like what I'd imagined for her, terrified me. Not because you're not good enough, but because I couldn't control it. Couldn't ensure she'd be safe or happy or protected from struggle." "You can't control any of that anyway," Daniel said quietly. "Sarah was exactly the kind of woman you'd probably have approved for your daughter. Educated, from a good family, all the right credentials. She still died at 24 and left me alone with a newborn. Life doesn't care about your plans or your protections. It happens anyway." "I'm beginning to understand that," Richard said. "My wife has been very clear about the ways I've failed to accept things I can't control. Evelyn's infertility, her happiness, her choices. None of those were mine to manage. I was treating your relationship like a business deal I needed to vet instead of recognizing my daughter's autonomy." "What changed?" Daniel asked. "Between Saturday and now?" "My wife told me about her visit to your apartment," Richard said. "About meeting Mia, seeing how you live, understanding what you've built from very little. She said Mia asked her if she thought you were a bad choice for Evelyn because of her, because Mia exists and complicates things." His expression tightened with something like shame. "And she said watching that little girl worry that she was the problem, that her existence was the obstacle to her father's happiness, made her realize what I'd done. I'd made a child feel like a burden instead of a blessing." "Mia is not a burden," Daniel said flatly. "She's the best thing in my life. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth my time or Evelyn's." "I see it now," Richard said. "I saw it in the background check, actually, even though I was too busy cataloging your financial struggles to recognize it. Every decision you've made has prioritized her well-being over your own advancement. You've turned down promotions that would require travel. You've stayed in an affordable apartment in a good school district instead of taking something nicer in a worse area. You've paid medical bills that would have been discharged in bankruptcy because you wanted to teach her that debts are obligations, not inconveniences. He paused. That's not failure, Daniel. That's extraordinary parenting. I just couldn't see it through my fear. Daniel felt something shift in his chest, the tight knot of anger loosening fractionally. I need to know this won't happen again. That you won't investigate me or judge my choices or treat me like I'm not good enough every time I don't meet your expectations. It won't, Richard said firmly. You have my word. And if you're willing, I'd like to start over. Not as a concerned father vetting his daughter's choice, but as... He hesitated. As family. Or at least as someone trying to earn the right to be family. That's going to take time, Daniel said carefully. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight, especially after what happened. I understand. I'm willing to put in the time if you're willing to give me the chance. They talked for another hour, Richard asking genuine questions about Daniel's work, his relationship with Evelyn, his hopes for the future. It wasn't comfortable, and it wasn't easy, but it was honest in a way their first meeting had never been. By the time they parted, Daniel felt cautiously optimistic that maybe, eventually, they could find common ground. One more thing, Richard said as they prepared to leave. I'd like to do something to help with your financial situation. Not as charity or as buying my way back into favor, but as what family does for each other. May I pay off your medical debt and credit cards? Consider it an early wedding gift, if that makes it easier to accept. Daniel's first instinct was to refuse. But he thought about Evelyn's argument about partnership, about Mia's observation that pride was dumb if it prevented accepting help you needed. He thought about the weight he'd been carrying for 7 years, the constant anxiety about one more emergency pushing them into complete financial collapse. Okay, he said finally, but I need you to understand something. This doesn't mean you were right about investigating me. It doesn't mean I owe you deference or that you get a say in how Evelyn and I live our lives. This is a gift freely given, or it's nothing. Can you accept those terms? I can, Richard said, and for what it's worth, I don't want deference. I want to know my future grandchild, to be part of her life without hovering or controlling, to maybe learn from you about what real parenting looks like, instead of the corporate approach I used with my own daughters. The admission surprised Daniel with its vulnerability. You did all right with Evelyn? She turned out pretty remarkable. Despite my parenting, not because of it, Richard said wryly. But thank you for the generosity. They parted with a handshake that felt less like a business transaction and more like the tentative beginning of actual relationship. Daniel drove home feeling lighter than he had in years, the prospect of financial stability almost incomprehensible after so long living paycheck to paycheck. Evelyn was waiting at his apartment when he arrived, having convinced Mrs. Chen to let her in. Mia was already asleep, but Evelyn was curled up on the couch with a legal pad covered in notes, looking every inch the lawyer tackling a complex case. How did it go? She asked immediately. Daniel collapsed beside her, suddenly exhausted. Better than I expected. He apologized, said some things that suggest he might actually understand what he did wrong. My mother's influence, Evelyn said with satisfaction. She's been working on him all week. I think watching him almost destroy our relationship scared her into action. He offered to pay off my debt, Daniel said, as a wedding gift. I said yes. Evelyn set aside her legal pad, her full attention on him now. How do you feel about that? Terrified, Daniel admitted. Relieved, guilty for feeling relieved, worried that accepting creates obligations I don't want. Grateful anyway. He leaned his head back against the couch. Mostly I feel like maybe this could actually work. All of it. Your family, our relationship, building something real out of this crazy arrangement we started with. It stopped being an arrangement a long time ago, Evelyn said softly. She took his hand, threading their fingers together. I love you, Daniel. I've been trying to find the right moment to say it, but I don't think there is a right moment. I love you. Your integrity, your dedication to Mia, your willingness to keep trying even when it's terrifying. I love all of it. Daniel turned to face her fully, seeing the vulnerability in her expression, the fear that he might not feel the same way. "I love you too," he said, the words coming easier than he'd expected. "I didn't think I could love anyone after Sarah. Thought that part of me died with her. But what I feel for you isn't the same thing I felt for her. It's different, but it's real, and it's growing every day we spend together." "Different how?" Evelyn asked. "Sarah and I fell in love fast and hard, all passion and intensity and certainty that we were meant to be together," Daniel said slowly, working through thoughts he'd never fully articulated. "What we're building is slower, more deliberate. We're choosing each other with full knowledge of the complications and challenges. There's no illusion that love will be enough to overcome everything. We know it won't. But we're building something stronger than just emotion. We're building partnership." "Partnership," Evelyn repeated, testing the word. "I like that. It feels more honest than romance, more durable than passion." "It feels like us," Daniel agreed. They sat together in the quiet apartment, both processing how far they'd come from that Christmas night when a desperate woman had propositioned a humiliated stranger. So much had changed, so many walls had come down, so many impossibilities had been revealed as merely difficult rather than insurmountable. "I want to do this properly," Daniel said suddenly. "The proposal, I mean. Not just agreeing that we're getting married eventually, but actually asking you, making it official." "You don't have to," Evelyn began. "I want to," Daniel interrupted. "You deserve to be chosen deliberately, publicly, with full commitment, not as a solution to loneliness or a practical arrangement, but as the woman I love and want to spend my life with." He paused. "Though I have no idea how to do it. I proposed to Sarah with my grandmother's ring and a borrowed car at a scenic overlook. Not sure that playbook works here." "I don't need scenic overlooks or family jewelry," Evelyn said. "I just need you to mean it." "I mean it," Daniel said. "More than I've meant anything except my commitment to Mia. You've become essential to my life, to our life. The thought of going back to how things were before you..." He shook his head. "I can't imagine it anymore. Don't want to imagine it." "Good," Evelyn said, her eyes bright with unshed tears, "because I feel exactly the same way." Over the next 2 weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. Evelyn spent more nights at Daniel's apartment than her own, her presence becoming so natural that Mia stopped commenting on it. They navigated morning routines and evening bedtimes, figuring out who was better at helping with homework and who could actually cook edible meals. Richard and Margaret made tentative overtures, inviting them to dinner without Christine's judgmental commentary, making genuine efforts to connect with Mia without the classist undertones that had marked earlier interactions. The financial relief of having his debt eliminated allowed Daniel to breathe for the first time in years. He opened a savings account, started contributing to Mia's college fund, even bought himself new shoes that didn't pinch. Small things, but each one a reminder that struggle wasn't his permanent state, that partnership meant sharing both burdens and resources. Evelyn formally listed her condo for rent, the decision marking her commitment to their shared future. They started looking at apartments together, trying to find something that would work for all three of them, close to Mia's school, affordable even on Daniel's salary alone in case anything happened, large enough to feel like a real home rather than a cramped compromise. Through it all, Daniel planned. He talked to Mrs. Chen about Mia's favorite places, consulted with Marcus about whether the plan was too simple or too elaborate. He called Margaret, who surprised him by offering genuine help rather than taking over the entire event. He found his grandmother's ring in the storage unit where he'd kept Sarah's things, carefully preserved in its original box. The ring had been intended for Sarah, but she'd never worn it. They'd sold it to pay for her funeral, a practicality that had broken his heart at the time. He'd bought it back 2 years later when he could afford it, keeping it as a connection to both his grandmother and his lost wife. Now, looking at the simple gold band with its modest diamond, he wondered if Sarah would approve of him offering it to someone new. "She'd want you to be happy," Mrs. Chen said when he voiced the concern. "Your Sarah was many things, but she wasn't selfish. She'd want Mia to have a mother and you to have a partner. This ring is about family, not about replacing anyone." On a Saturday in late February, with the first hints of spring teasing at the edges of winter, Daniel put his plan into action. He told Evelyn they were taking Mia to the planetarium for her early birthday celebration, a special show about Mars exploration that Mia had been begging to see. What he didn't mention was that he'd arranged for a private viewing after the regular show, just the three of them in the vast darkness beneath artificial stars. Mia was in on the plan, barely able to contain her excitement as they settled into the planetarium seats. The regular show played to its conclusion, other visitors filing out while their small family remained. When the room had emptied, the planetarium director appeared, a friend of Marcus's who'd agreed to help with Daniel's scheme. "We have a special presentation tonight," the director announced, his voice amplified by the sound system. "A story about three people building a family among the stars." The dome above them lit up, and Daniel's breath caught. Marcus had helped him create a custom show, photographs of their journey together projected against the artificial cosmos. There was the coffee shop where they'd met, the park where Mia had first talked to Evelyn about space, Daniel's apartment where they'd built their unconventional family, Margaret's first visit, Richard's apology dinner, moments both ordinary and extraordinary mapped across the universe above them. "Once upon a time," the director narrated in a voice warm with emotion, "there was a man who thought he'd never find love again, a woman who believed she'd always be alone, and a little girl who just wanted a family. They found each other on Christmas night, and they built something impossible together, something real." Evelyn was crying openly now, her hand gripping Daniel's so hard it hurt. Mia was bouncing in her seat, delighted to see their story told in stars. The presentation concluded with a final image. The three of them together, laughing in Daniel's kitchen, covered in flour from an ambitious baking project that had ended in disaster and joy in equal measure. As the image faded, the dome shifted to show a simple question written in light across the cosmos. "Will you marry us?" Daniel stood, his heart hammering, and turned to Evelyn. In the darkness, with stars surrounding them and Mia watching with barely contained excitement, he pulled out his grandmother's ring. "Evelyn Cross," he said, his voice shaking but clear, "you walked into my life when I'd given up on happiness. You chose me and my daughter when the world told us we weren't worth choosing. You fought for us, stood up to your family for us, built a future with us when it would have been easier to walk away." He took a breath. "I love you. Mia loves you. And we're asking if you'll choose us one more time, permanently, legally, completely. Will you marry me? Will you become Mia's mother and my wife? And the final piece of this impossible family we've built?" "Yes," Evelyn said through her tears, not even waiting for him to finish. "Yes, absolutely yes. I will marry you and be Mia's mother and build this family and—" She laughed, pulling him close. "Yes to all of it, forever, without question." Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. Mia cheered, the sound echoing in the vast space, and launched herself at both of them. They held each other beneath the artificial stars, this family they'd built from loneliness and determination and impossible hope. Later, after they'd thanked the director and stepped back into the February night, Mia asked the question that had been building since the show concluded. "When can we tell Grandma Margaret?" she asked, the title coming naturally now. "She's going to be so excited, and Grandpa Richard too, even though he tries to pretend he doesn't have feelings." "Tomorrow," Evelyn said, laughing at the observation. "We'll tell them tomorrow. Tonight is just for us." They walked to the car through streets beginning to bloom with early spring, their hands linked together, their future spreading before them like the cosmos they'd just left behind. There would be challenges ahead, adoption paperwork and wedding planning, navigating two families and two very different worlds, all the ordinary complications of building a life together. But standing there in the parking lot with his daughter and his fiancée, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced in 7 years. Not just hope, not just relief from loneliness, but genuine, uncomplicated joy at the life they'd chosen together. "I can't believe this is real," Evelyn said softly, studying the ring on her finger as if it might disappear. "I can't believe I get to have this." "We all get to have this," Mia corrected, inserting herself between the adults. "That's what family means. We all get each other." And really, Daniel thought, as they drove home through the winter night towards spring and everything that came after, there was no better way to say it than that. The morning after the proposal, Daniel woke to find Mia already awake and sitting at the foot of his bed, staring at him with an intensity that suggested she'd been there for some time. We need to call Grandma Margaret right now, she announced before he could even orient himself to consciousness. I've been waiting for 45 minutes, and that's very patient for someone who's almost 8. Daniel checked his phone and discovered it was barely 6:30 in the morning. Mia, she's probably still asleep. She texted me last night, Mia interrupted, holding up her own phone, a basic model Daniel had given her for emergencies that she'd somehow convinced Margaret to exchange numbers on. She said to call her the minute we had news, anytime, day or night. So technically, we're late. Evelyn emerged from the bathroom, already dressed, her engagement ring catching the early light. She's been texting me too, since 5 a.m. I think your mother has developed an anxiety disorder about missing important moments. That's what happens when you almost destroy your daughter's relationship, Daniel muttered, but he was smiling as he said it. All right, Mia, call your grandmother. Mia didn't need to be told twice. She hit the call button with the confidence of someone who'd recently decided that grandmothers were people you could just talk to whenever you wanted. Margaret answered on the second ring, her voice alert despite the early hour. Mia, is everything all right? Everything's perfect, Mia said, practically vibrating with excitement. Dad proposed to Evelyn at the planetarium and she said yes, and now we're getting married and you're going to be my real grandma, and I need you to help me pick a dress for the wedding because Dad doesn't know anything about dresses. There was a pause, then the sound of Margaret's breath catching. He proposed? Last night? Under the stars with pictures and everything, Mia confirmed. It was super romantic. Evelyn cried a lot, but in a happy way, and the ring fits perfect. Can you come over today? We have to start planning. I'll be there in an hour, Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion. Put your father on the phone, please. Mia handed over the phone with a satisfied smile. Daniel took it cautiously, not entirely sure what to expect. Daniel, Margaret's voice was warm in a way he'd never heard before. Thank you for choosing my daughter, for including Mia in the proposal, for giving me another chance after everything. She paused, clearly composing herself. I promise you won't regret this. Any of this. I know I won't, Daniel said, surprised by how much he meant it. We're building something good here, all of us together. Yes, Margaret agreed. Yes, we are. She arrived exactly 1 hour later with Richard in tow, both of them carrying bags from an expensive bakery and wearing expressions of determined enthusiasm. Mia greeted them at the door like visiting dignitaries, ushering them into the small apartment with the gravity of a diplomat arranging a peace summit. We need to discuss the wedding, Mia announced before anyone could exchange pleasantries, because I have opinions and everyone needs to hear them. Of course you do, Richard said, and there was genuine affection in his tone now, the wariness from their first meetings replaced by something softer. What are your opinions, Miss Mia? First, no boring church stuff because we don't do that, Mia said, ticking off points on her fingers. Second, it should be somewhere we all actually want to be, not somewhere fancy that makes Dad uncomfortable. Third, I want to be part of the ceremony, not just standing there looking cute. And fourth, she looked at Evelyn seriously. I want to adopt you too. If you're adopting me, I should adopt you back. That's fair. Evelyn made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. I would be honored to be adopted by you. Good. Then we need a lawyer to write that up properly because I want it legal. Mia turned to Margaret. Can you help with that? You know lawyer people. I know several excellent family law attorneys, Margaret said, her eyes bright. I'll make some calls today. The morning dissolved into animated discussion, everyone contributing ideas while Mia moderated with the authority of someone who'd clearly given this considerable thought. No country club receptions or formal church ceremonies. Instead, something smaller, more intimate, reflecting who they actually were rather than who Richard's social circle might expect them to be. What about the botanical gardens? Evelyn suggested. The indoor conservatory where they have the tropical plants? It's beautiful, it's close to home, and Mia loves it there. Can we do it in spring when everything's blooming? Mia asked, already mentally decorating the space. We can do it whenever you want, Daniel said, pulling his daughter onto his lap. This is our wedding, all three of us. We make the rules. May 1st, Evelyn decided. That gives us 2 months to plan, which is tight but manageable. Small guest list, immediate family only. No elaborate productions, just us and the people we love. I can work with that timeline, Margaret said, already making notes on her phone with the efficiency of someone organizing a military campaign. I'll handle the venue, the catering, the logistics. You three focus on the ceremony itself and what you want it to say. Over the following weeks, the apartment became wedding planning central. Mia appointed herself chief coordinator, maintaining a color-coded calendar on the refrigerator that tracked every decision and deadline. She took her role seriously, researching wedding traditions online and then ruthlessly discarding the ones she deemed too weird or not about actual family. The adoption paperwork proceeded with surprising speed, helped by Margaret's connections and Evelyn's legal expertise. They met with a family court judge who reviewed their situation with kind eyes and asked Mia directly if this was what she wanted. "I want Evelyn to be my mom," Mia said clearly. "Not instead of my birth mom, because Sarah will always be my mom who died, but also my mom who's here now. People can have more than one mom if they need to." "That's a very mature perspective," the judge said gently. "And you understand this means Evelyn will have legal rights and responsibilities regarding your care?" "I understand it means she's my real mom forever and can't leave even if things get hard," Mia said. "That's what I want." The judge approved the petition on the spot, setting a finalization date for 2 weeks before the wedding. Evelyn would become Mia's legal mother before becoming Daniel's wife, a sequence that felt right to all of them, establishing the parent-child bond before formalizing the marriage. Christine made an unexpected appearance 3 weeks before the wedding, showing up at Daniel's apartment with her children, and an expression that suggested she'd been sent on a mission she hadn't entirely volunteered for. "Mother says I need to apologize," she began without preamble, then stopped herself. "No, that's not fair. I need to apologize because I was awful at that first dinner and I've been resistant to accepting this whole situation. I'm sorry." Daniel studied her, trying to gauge sincerity. "What changed?" "Honestly, watching my kids with Mia," Christine admitted. "They came home from that first meeting talking about how cool she was, how smart, how she explained computers to them in ways that actually made sense. And I realized I'd been so focused on protecting Evelyn from making a mistake that I completely missed the fact that she'd found something real." She glanced at her children, who were already gravitating toward Mia's science projects. "You're good for her, both of you, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." "Apology accepted," Daniel said, because what else could he say? Grudges were exhausting, and Christine was trying. "You want to stay for lunch? We were about to order pizza." "I'd like that," Christine said, and the relief on her face suggested she'd expected to be turned away. The afternoon proved surprisingly pleasant, Christine's children asking endless questions about Mia's upcoming adoption, while Brad actually engaged in real conversation about the challenges of blended families. By the time they left, Christine hugged Evelyn tightly and whispered something that made Evelyn's eyes go bright with tears. "She said she was proud of me," Evelyn told Daniel later that night. "Said I'd built something braver than she ever could have, choosing love over convention. I never thought I'd hear her say anything like that." "People can surprise you," Daniel said, the phrase becoming something of a mantra, "when you give them room to grow." The adoption finalization happened on a Tuesday afternoon in a courtroom that felt more like a conference room, intimate and quiet rather than imposing. The judge, the same woman who'd approved the petition, smiled as they entered. "This is one of my favorite types of cases," she said, gesturing for them to approach the bench, "where everyone involved clearly wants the same thing, and it's obviously in the child's best interest." She looked at Mia directly. "Miss Moore, do you understand what's happening today?" "I'm getting adopted by Evelyn, so she's my legal mom forever," Mia said with absolute certainty. "And then in 2 weeks, we're all getting married at the botanical gardens." "Excellent summary," the judge said, her eyes twinkling. "Ms. Cross, do you understand that by adopting Mia, you're taking on all the rights and responsibilities of parenthood, that this isn't temporary or conditional, but permanent and legally binding?" "I understand completely," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "And I accept gladly. Mia is already my daughter in every way that matters. This just makes it official." Mr. Moore, do you consent to this adoption?" "Absolutely," Daniel said, his own voice breaking. "Evelyn has been Mia's mother in practice for months now. We're just catching the paperwork up to reality." The judge signed the final documents with a flourish, then did something unusual. She came around the bench to shake each of their hands personally. "Congratulations," she said warmly. "You've built a beautiful family through intention and choice rather than accident of biology. That's something to be proud of." She crouched down to Mia's level. "And you, young lady, are very fortunate to have not one but two parents who love you enough to fight for you." "I know," Mia said simply. "I'm pretty lucky." They celebrated with ice cream and an impromptu visit to the planetarium, Mia insisting she wanted to see the stars where her parents had gotten engaged. Standing in the darkness with artificial constellations wheeling overhead, Daniel felt the weight of the past 7 years finally lifting. He'd carried Sarah's death and his own inadequacy for so long, convinced he could never be enough for Mia alone. But he'd been wrong. He'd been enough. And now, with Evelyn, they were building something even stronger. The final 2 weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of last-minute details and nervous anticipation. Mia's dress arrived, a simple pale blue that she'd chosen herself because astronauts don't wear pink. Daniel's suit was tailored by a professional Margaret insisted on paying for, the fit transforming his borrowed clothes' discomfort into actual confidence. Evelyn's dress was elegant ivory, chosen for its simplicity rather than its price tag, though Daniel suspected it had cost more than he wanted to know. Margaret threw a small family dinner 3 nights before the wedding, gathering everyone at her home for what she called a proper celebration without the tension of our first attempt. The evening proved remarkably relaxed, Christine's children playing with Mia while the adults talked easily about the upcoming ceremony. Even Richard seemed genuinely at peace, asking Daniel about his thoughts on home security systems with what appeared to be actual interest rather than veiled interrogation. "I never thought I'd see my father bond with someone over firewall configurations," Evelyn murmured to Daniel as they watched Richard enthusiastically explaining his home network setup. "This is surreal." "Your whole family is surreal," Daniel said, but he was smiling. "In a mostly good way now." "Mostly good is better than actively hostile," Evelyn agreed. "I'll take it." The night before the wedding, Evelyn stayed at her old condo as per tradition, leaving Daniel and Mia alone in the apartment that would soon belong to all 3 of them officially. They'd found a larger place closer to Mia's school, but wouldn't move until after the honeymoon, a week at a beach resort that Margaret had insisted on funding as a wedding gift. "Are you nervous?" Mia asked as Daniel tucked her in, her question carrying more weight than its simple words suggested. "A little," Daniel admitted, "but good nervous, excited nervous." "Me too," Mia said. She was quiet for a moment, then, "Dad, is it okay that I'm excited even though it means Mom Sarah isn't here?" Daniel's heart clenched. They'd talked about Sarah throughout the adoption process, making sure Mia understood she wasn't replacing her birth mother, but adding to her family. Still, the question revealed anxiety he should have anticipated. "Your mom Sarah would want you to be excited," Daniel said carefully, sitting on the edge of her bed. "She loved you more than anything, and she wanted you to have a full, happy life with people who loved you. Evelyn being your mom now doesn't erase Sarah or make her less important. It just means you have 2 mothers, one who gave you life and one who's here to help you live it." "That's what Evelyn says too," Mia said. "She says Sarah will always be my first mom, and she's honored to be my second mom. I like that she doesn't try to replace her." "That's because Evelyn understands that love doesn't work like that," Daniel said. "You can love both your mothers without taking away from either one. Your heart's big enough." "My heart's huge," Mia said with sleepy confidence. "It has room for everyone." Daniel kissed her forehead and stood to leave, but Mia's voice stopped him. "Dad, thank you for not giving up. When Grandpa Richard was mean and you walked out, I thought you were going to stay gone. Thank you for coming back and fighting. Thank you for being brave enough to tell me I was wrong," Daniel said, his throat tight. "I learn a lot from you, Mia, more than you probably realize." "I know," she said, utterly matter-of-fact. "I'm very wise for 7, almost 8. Daniel laughed, the sound mixing with tears he hadn't realized were falling. "Yes, you are. Now sleep. Tomorrow's a big day." "Tomorrow we become a real family," Mia corrected drowsily. "We already were, but tomorrow everyone else knows it too." The wedding day dawned clear and warm, May 1st delivering on its promise of spring renewal. Daniel woke early, nerves and excitement making sleep impossible. He made coffee and stood at the window watching the city wake up, marveling at how much had changed since that Christmas night when a stranger had asked him to consider marriage. Mrs. Chen arrived at 8 to help Mia get ready, her eyes already damp with sentimental tears. "I remember when you brought that baby home from the hospital," she said, bustling around the apartment, so scared, so determined to do right by her. "Look at you now, building a family, giving her a mother, finally letting yourself be happy." "I couldn't have done any of this without you," Daniel said honestly. "All those nights you watched Mia, all the advice, all the times you told me I was being an idiot, it mattered. You matter." "Save the tears for the ceremony," Mrs. Chen scolded, but she hugged him fiercely. "Now, go get dressed. Your bride is waiting." The Botanical Gardens Conservatory was transformed when they arrived, Margaret having worked some kind of miracle with the staff. White chairs arranged in a small semicircle faced an arch woven with spring flowers. Nothing elaborate, nothing excessive, just beauty in its simplest form. The guest list was tiny by conventional wedding standards. Mrs. Chen, Marcus and his wife, Richard and Margaret, Christine's family, a handful of Evelyn's closest colleagues, and the family court judge who'd finalized Mia's adoption. Evelyn was already there when they arrived, having apparently abandoned the tradition of the groom not seeing the bride before the ceremony. She took one look at Daniel in his tailored suit, and her eyes went bright. "You're stunning," she said, reaching for his hands. "Both of you." Mia preened in her blue dress, the color choice deliberate because it matched the sky where she planned to travel someday. "You're pretty too," she told Evelyn seriously. "Not like princess pretty, but like scientist pretty. That's better." "Highest compliment," Evelyn said, crouching down to Mia's level. "Are you ready for this?" "I've been ready forever," Mia said. "You're the ones who took so long to figure it out." The ceremony was officiated by a friend of Evelyn's from law school who'd been ordained online specifically for this purpose. She welcomed their small gathering with warmth and humor, acknowledging the unconventional nature of their union while celebrating its obvious authenticity. "We're here today to witness something remarkable," she began. "Not just a marriage between two people, but the formation of a family built on choice rather than chance. Daniel, Evelyn, and Mia have already been living as a family for months. Today, they're simply making it official in front of the people they love." The vows they'd written together were simple and honest. Daniel spoke first, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Evelyn, when you approached me on Christmas night, I thought you were crazy. Turns out you were just brave enough to ask for what you wanted instead of settling for loneliness. You saw past my failures to the person I was trying to be. You chose Mia and me when the world told us we weren't worth choosing. I promise to keep choosing you back. In easy times and hard times, when your family drives us crazy and when mine does, through everything life throws at us. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and the person who sees you completely and loves you anyway." Evelyn's vows came through tears that she didn't bother wiping away. "Daniel, you taught me that family isn't about perfection or meeting expectations. It's about showing up and doing the work even when it's hard. You and Mia gave me purpose when I'd resigned myself to loneliness, gave me hope when I'd stopped believing in happy endings. I promise to honor Sarah's memory by loving Mia as fiercely as she did. I promise to stand beside you through struggle and joy. I promise to build this family with intention and courage and absolute commitment. I choose you. I choose us. Today and always." Then it was Mia's turn, stepping forward with the rings they'd asked her to carry. But instead of simply handing them over, she looked at both adults seriously. "I have something to say too," she announced, apparently improvising. "Everybody always talks about parents promising to take care of kids, but I promise to take care of you guys too. I promise to tell the truth even when it's hard. I promise to remember we're a team and teams help each other. And I promise to love you both forever because you loved me first." There wasn't a dry eye in the conservatory. Even Richard was visibly struggling with composure. The rings were exchanged, simple gold bands they'd chosen together, inscribed inside with the date they'd met rather than the wedding date, acknowledging that their real beginning had been that impossible Christmas conversation. The officiant pronounced them married with obvious delight, and they sealed it with a kiss that felt like both an ending and a beginning. The reception was informal, heavy appetizers and champagne in the conservatory's attached garden room, children running between tables while adults mingled easily. Margaret had arranged for a small cake decorated with constellations, a nod to the proposal that had started all of this. Mia gave a toast that was mostly facts about Mars rovers, but ended with a declaration that she had the best parents in the solar system, possibly the universe, but we won't know for sure until we check other planets. Richard approached Daniel during a quiet moment, his expression carrying an unfamiliar vulnerability. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for giving me the chance to be better, for not writing me off after everything." He glanced at where Mia was explaining something to Margaret with wild hand gestures. "That little girl is extraordinary, and watching you with her, seeing the father you are, it's reminded me what actually matters. Not success or status, but showing up for the people you love." "You're showing up now," Daniel said simply. "That's what counts." "I'd like to be part of her life," Richard said carefully. "Part of all your lives, if you'll have me. Not the controlling executive trying to manage outcomes, but just a grandfather who wants to know his granddaughter." "Mia would like that," Daniel said. "She's already informed me that you're teaching her about investment portfolios next weekend. Apparently she has plans for her allowance." Richard's laugh was genuine and warm. "She's going to run a company someday. Mark my words." As the afternoon faded into evening, their small gathering showed no signs of dispersing. Someone had brought a speaker, and impromptu dancing broke out in the garden room. Daniel found himself slow dancing with Evelyn while Mia danced with Richard, her small feet standing on his expensive shoes, the way Daniel remembered doing with his own grandfather decades ago. "We did it," Evelyn murmured against his shoulder. "We actually pulled this off." "We built a family out of nothing," Daniel corrected, "against all odds and conventional wisdom. That's bigger than just pulling off a wedding." "Much bigger," Evelyn agreed. She pulled back to look at him, her expression soft with contentment. "I love you. I love Mia. I love this strange, imperfect, absolutely perfect family we've created." "I love you too," Daniel said. "Both of you. All of us." Mia appeared at their side, inserting herself between them with the presumption of someone who knew she belonged there. "Can we go see the stars now? The real stars? I want to see them on our wedding night." They slipped away from the reception, driving to the same overlook where Daniel had proposed to Sarah a decade ago. But this time felt different, not haunted by grief but enriched by it, understanding that love didn't replace love but added to the accumulated experience of a life lived fully. The three of them lay on the grass looking up at the cosmos, Mia pointing out constellations and theorizing about parallel universes where other versions of them were doing the same thing. Evelyn held Daniel's hand, her wedding ring cool against his palm. Somewhere above them, stars that had died billions of years ago still shone their ancient light, reminding them that beauty could persist even after its source had gone. "This is perfect," Mia announced. "Everything is exactly right." And looking at his daughter, their daughter now, legally and permanently, Daniel had to agree. Nothing about their family fit conventional molds or followed expected patterns. They'd built it from desperation and pragmatism, from impossible proposals and investigated backgrounds, from rejection and determination and the slow building of trust. But it was theirs, real and imperfect, and absolutely worth fighting for. "Tell me about the stars, astronaut," Daniel said, pulling Mia closer. "Tell us everything you know." So she did, her young voice carrying into the night, explaining the universe with the confidence of someone who'd learned that family, like space, was infinite enough to hold all the love you were brave enough to offer. Evelyn listened with the same focused attention she brought to everything Mia said, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than polite indulgence. And Daniel watched both of them, marveling at the family they'd become. Not the family anyone would have predicted or planned, not the family that made sense on paper or satisfied conventional expectations, but a family nonetheless, built on choice, sustained by commitment, and strengthened by their willingness to keep choosing each other even when it was hard. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human drama and human joy alike, witness to countless stories of love and loss across the millennia. But on this particular May evening, they shone down on three people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built something worth celebrating. A man who'd learned that protecting his daughter meant teaching her to fight rather than running from difficulty. A woman who'd discovered that family could be chosen as deliberately as any career path. And a child who'd shown both of them that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision to love anyway, to trust anyway, to believe that happiness was worth the risk of potential heartbreak. They drove home eventually, Mia falling asleep in the back seat, clutching the bouquet she'd insisted on carrying all day. Daniel carried her upstairs while Evelyn unlocked the door to their apartment, both of them moving with the synchronized efficiency of partners who knew each other's rhythms. After Mia was tucked in, still in her blue dress because she'd refused to change, Daniel and Evelyn stood together in the small living room that would soon be packed into boxes for the move to their new place. Everything was about to change again, expanding and growing as their family grew. "No regrets?" Daniel asked softly. "Not even one," Evelyn said with absolute certainty. "This is everything I wanted without knowing I could want it. You gave me that, both of you." "You gave us the same thing," Daniel countered. "A family, a future, the courage to believe we deserve both." They stood together in the quiet apartment, exhausted and happy, married and whole. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to individual stories of joy and struggle. But inside, three people who'd found each other on the worst Christmas night of their lives were building something that would last far beyond any single moment of happiness or pain. A family. Imperfect and unconventional and absolutely real. Built not from fairy tale romance or biological imperative, but from the harder, more durable foundation of choice, renewed daily, tested constantly, and ultimately stronger for having been deliberately constructed rather than accidentally discovered. And in the morning, they'd wake up as a family officially recognized by law and society, ready to face whatever came next with the knowledge that they'd already survived the hardest part, the courage to begin. But tonight, they simply stood together in the gathering darkness, holding each other close, and let themselves be happy. Completely, unreservedly, unapologetically happy. It was enough. They were enough. Together they were everything.